Hello, Doooovid here with Jennifer, Church of Entropy, a special Saturday night stream to discuss this extremely important issue of coronavirus. It's crazy. As of now, almost everything's closed down, and you could be extreme danger. We look at what exactly is going on. What is coronavirus? Why is everything being shut down? How bad could it be? What's the science behind it? What's some of the karma behind it? And look at some of the news. So I'm going to try to make it somewhat comprehensive. So if people didn't know much about it, they would be able to know generally a little bit of the important information. And then afterwards, Jennifer will probably carry on and talk about some of the different science and karmatic understanding. So if Jennifer's ready, I'm just going to pop straight into screen share and start showing some of what's going on, probably opening with some of these notifications about things being closed down. So Jennifer, feel free to stop in and say something anytime.
Thanks everyone for joining. Great to be here tonight on a special Saturday night stream with Doooovid discussing the coronavirus. I've got a new news show on my channel, so please subscribe to that if you get a chance, and I look forward to this stream this evening. Over to you, Doooovid.
Okay, so see here, this is the Archdiocese of Detroit coronavirus response. After consultation with healthcare professionals and government officials, Archbishop Vigneron is temporarily suspending all public masses in the Archdiocese of Detroit until Monday, April 6th. You can watch it online. They'll continue to monitor the status of coronavirus in our community and offer our prayers for those affected. We should pray for medical professionals, researchers, and government leaders that the Lord would give the wisdom in their work and that we would heed their advice and directions for the good of society. So just to show everything that I usually do on my YouTube page, closed. Downtown synagogue. We have decided to move all services online through April 19th. While we all feel the need to come together in community, we encourage you virtually join us tonight. In consultation with the Jewish Federation of Metro Detroit, the Michigan Board of Rabbis, the local executive directors, our staff and leadership, and our understanding of Pikuach Nefesh, which means risking your life, the importance of saving a life, we have decided that all in-person programs, events, and services will be postponed or moved online through April 19th. And so on and so on. Past the ISKCON, Farmington Hills, even the Hare Krishnas are closing up. Just looking as of now, the temple is open all days and the temple functions in a normal way as per the regular schedule. But the Sunday, all programs are finished. The temple is actually still remaining. You could go and perform your religious duties. ISKCON Detroit also, they had a pretty nice way of expressing this. Sorry about that. Hare Krishna, dear friends and congregation members, we are actively monitoring the COVID-19 situation in accordance with medical professionals and relying upon guidelines established by the state of Michigan and CDC to guide appropriate actions in these times. Our foremost priority is the well-being, both physically and spiritually, of all congregation members. As such, we are modifying the Temple's Sunday Feast program to take necessary precautions for everyone's health and safety. We will also facilitating an opportunity to receive unlimited mercy of Sri Sri Radhakunja Bihari as we all work together to overcome these difficulties. We invite everyone to help overcoming these humanitarian challenges by increasing the spiritual energy around us by taking shelter of Lord Krishna through his holy names, teachings, and practices. History has proven over and over again the power of chanting the holy names and solving humanitarian challenges. This will be no different. In order to allow for adequate social distancing, the Sunday feast will be modified in the following ways. Temple will remain open during normal scheduled hours, 4:45 to 9 p.m., and all regular scheduled worship services will continue. all scheduled classes, adult and youth, kirtans, chanting, Sunday feast, dinner will be postponed until further notice. And there's more of these. Do you have something you want to add before maybe I read a few more of these, or are you having these in your area too? Have you had to close down what you usually do?
I live in a pretty remote area. I'm actually not really all that affected because I don't really have much that I normally do in a community setting. So I live pretty much like in I don't want to say a trailer park, but it's like a vacation home. It's not trailer park because it's actually houses, but it has a certain trailer park vibe in a good way. It's kind of like cabins out in Canada, except they're all in one place. So I actually saw some neighbors the other night and they weren't afraid and they had us over for beers. So that was funny. But yeah, so unfortunately it is affecting people. It seems to more so in the cities, and it'll be interesting to see what happens, especially with things going online. I wonder if some services will be permanently shifted to online as a result of this.
Well, we're going to start. We could talk about the implications and the analysis going forward. I just wanted to open up by reading some of these, and let me actually let me read one more. So this one was the synagogue near my house. They closed last minute. Originally, they were just going to stop food. Past 24 to 48 hours has been the most confusing, concerning time period in my 18 years of serving as rabbi. With much pain, heartache, and tears, but also with much conviction and certitude, I've decided in consultation with our shul leadership to suspend, starting immediately, all minyanim, shirim, and programs until further notice. In addition, due to current health concerns, private prayer services, classes, and get-togethers should not be held at individuals' homes. What has been so concerning is, of course, the health and well-being of our members as well as all our fellow citizens. We're living in frightening times with the outbreak of COVID-19. Torah values and Jewish law are unequivocal that human life and safety are in paramount importance and supersede almost all of their values and dictates. What has been so confusing is that even among the medical professionals and local, state, and federal health departments, there has been so many divergent opinions and recommendations as to what are the correct protective methods that we should all be following to combat and minimize the risk from COVID-19. I have personally been struggling with the question that if we suspend synagogue and limit contact with one another, shouldn't we also refrain from being in close contact with others at work, grocery store, bank, gym, and the list goes on and on? Why should we suspend synagogue and school but not these other activities? In truth, based on what I've learned from physicians in the past 24 to 48 hours, we should be doing our utmost to diminish contact with one another in all aspects of our life. If you can, it is best to work from home. We should not be inviting one another to Sabbath meals for the time being. We should not be getting together with friends. Children should not be sent to daycare, and our children should not be having play dates. So it continues. Crazy stuff like this is unprecedented in the history of the world, and even to just I was just looking at this Harinam Sankirtan, the Hare Krishnas in New York City, just now 35 minutes ago. Notice regarding coronavirus situation effects organized by the Yuga Dharma Ashram. As the coronavirus pandemic spreads around the world in New York City, Yuga Dharma Ashram is taking the following steps to minimize the risk of infection. Daily Harinam will be restricted to within the ashram premises and surrounding neighborhoods. Our brahmacharyas will not use public transportation and will avoid contact with public even for distributing books. All Sunday programs and other events at the ashram open to the public have been canceled until further notice. Devotees willing to visit the ashram and participate in the Harinam or morning programs may do so only with prior notice, and after obtaining permission from ashram authorities, they're requested strict observe the following regulations. And that goes on and we'll talk a little bit about the virus and what to do about it and how to know.
Sounds like the practice of untouchability is coming back.
Well, it's interesting because we're going to see that really no one knows what they're doing. So there's some people who have these concepts about what are viruses, what are pandemics, and what's the best way to handle them. But there's a lot of dispute among it. So, I just wanted to give the gravity of the situation. Basically everything that I do is closed down.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
However, the businesses are all still open. Like I went shopping, you see all the things about the toilet paper scares and so let's just see a little bit, more of how severe this is. Jewish community grinding to a halt as coronavirus spreads. Basically, schools, synagogues gathering, saying like, don't even have your kids play with the kids from across the street. Israel, more seriously, Israel plans to use counterterrorism tools to stop spread of coronavirus. Netanyahu. Government enacted new restrictions, including the closures of all restaurants, cafes, and theaters, and called for offices to have employees work from home. We are at war with an enemy, the coronavirus, an invisible enemy. A green light by the Justice Ministry to use intelligence tracking tools to digitally monitor coronavirus patients without asking them, which the Prime Minister admitted Saturday night infringes on personal privacy, but he argued that by using these means, we will be able to see who they are with, what happened before and after they were infected, and will be able to isolate the coronavirus and not the entire country. We are one of the few countries with this capability, and we will use it. We must do everything as a government and citizens to not become infected and to not infect others. So, I just want to show the gravity of the situation. So Israel, I'm going to show more. So interesting. Analysis, just the Jerusalem Post, some of these have paywalls. Here's the Yeshiva World News. Israel takes drastic measures. Cases soar to 195. Now it's probably higher than that. No gatherings of over 10 people. So Israel now has enacted that it's forbidden to have any gatherings over 10 people. That basically a partial shutdown of the economy. Supermarkets, pharmacies, banks, and gas stations will remain open, but non-essential businesses will be closed. Everyone out in public should maintain a distance of 2 meters between each person, including at workplaces. 70% of government employees will be asked to work from home. So on and so on. So, this is pretty intense. So, I'm going to go through the New York Times in depth, to show they have some good graphics to show what's really going on. And I have these graphics that are more mathematical that are going to show, like the spread and why this panic and what they're thinking. So did you have anything you want to add, Jennifer?
No, nothing for now. I'm just still listening in before we start the analysis.
Okay. Yeah. There's a lot to cover. So I wanted to, get through some of the heart of the matter and say, generally the understanding of, take it off screen share for a second. And you say generally the understanding of these viruses is completely based on evolution. What even a virus is, there are a lot of unknowns. Like we know a lot of stuff about viruses. Viruses have been around a long time, and we've had polio and mass casualties, the plague, and the understanding, coming to the microscope in the history of science, where I forget the exact, year, and the creation of vaccines and various things. But there's still a lot of mysteries and unknowns, even like what is a virus? Is it a life form? Like when I debated JF, and we debated about what is life, and life could only come from life. And the question is a virus actually a life form, because it replicates and shows some of the criteria for life, but not all of them. And so basically, like a virus is just this replicator, and why they exist in the universe. JF, John Francis Greppi, actually that's his book, part of his thesis of the revolutionary phenotype. But the existence of these viruses that basically just capture on other cells, use the other cells' DNA replication, RNA replication mechanism in order to replicate themselves, and then just keep on replicating. And in this case, we look at the New York Times, their diagrams. But that could eventually, like a cancer, kill a person. So a person gets these viruses, and they keep on replicating, and they could take over part of the lungs and kill a person. There's different ways that these ones transmit. There's ones that go through the blood. There's ones that go through the respiratory tract, and these viruses are extremely small. And there could be so one virus taking over one cell could actually possibly replicate millions of them. And
yeah, basically they're very simple. Like, have you ever seen an image of the chemical or atomic configuration of a virus?
yeah,
It usually
I'm
has
going
like
to show.
hexagon head. The reason why there's debate about whether it's alive or not is because a virus can be crystallized. So like after it's been crystallized, it can be decrystallized, and then it'll still work. So that you can't do that with most forms of life. So that's why there's a bit of, I would say that it is alive because it is spontaneously self-replicating. I would say that's my condition for life. But again, it's I suppose it's a bit of a semantic issue.
Yeah, so there's a lot of mysteries, like what happens, when we become affected, how do we become cured? But the majority of science around this is evolutionary based. And so, at least for the portion of covering the news, I will be discussing this, as if, God forbid, I was an acceptor of the theory of evolution. And then after, we've analyzed the news and why they're doing what they're doing, maybe we will discuss non-evolutionary interpretations of it. But I wanted to give that precursor because now we're talking about the government making decisions. We're talking about consensus of elites because I just showed kind of some of the stuff in the Jewish community, the stuff that I do. But in reality, universities, like everything shut down. They're restricting gatherings of more than 250 people. You saw in Israel, they're restricting gatherings at 10 people, and in Spain and Italy, they're restricting gatherings, basically completely. So we're going to see why this is so extreme, and these numbers, this kind of the unprecedented nature of what we're doing. How is it possible that there's a consensus among the elites that this is what's necessary for us to do to survive? Maybe some of the conspiracy theories, could it be a bioweapon? Could our elites be kind of using this, as I mentioned earlier, when they declare a national emergency? The purpose of the national emergency is multiple fold, but one of the things that national emergency does is allows the government to infringe upon our civil rights in terms of the right to gather, like Charlottesville and the statute. They declared state of emergency, and then it became illegal to gather, and they dispersed everybody. So in terms of that, like all of these states, the federal government has declared state of emergency, and the government has the right now to infringe upon our civil liberties. In terms like Israel, now they have the right to spy on everybody. They could track everything that you do because of coronavirus, or they have the right to restrict you from gathering or shutting down all of these things. So the conspiracy element has to be mentioned, and it's like, what is going on? This is crazy. How is it that all of these elites agree this is what's necessary? And like, how is it possible? Like, we're just shut down. This never happened before. So if Jennifer has any comments on that, otherwise I'm going to go straight into some of the New York Times coverage and some of these data pages to just try to really understand, what is this virus, what's it doing, why is everyone so scared?
Yeah, sounds great. I'm glad you brought up the conspiracy angle, because there have been some data that's come out regarding this virus that suggests something fishy may be afoot.
Yeah, but let's cover the mainstream opinion first. The dominant understanding, because it's crazy that everything's being shut down. So here, thehill.com collected together some pages that have some nice graphics, and they all have little benefits to them. So I'll try showing all of them briefly to kind of see mathematically what's going on, these mathematical structures, and why we're shutting down. So obviously here, you have in the upper left-hand corner, total confirmed cases, 156,000. And then you have by country, China, Italy's already over 20,000. Iran's already over 12,000. The U.S. is already at almost 3,000. And presumably, this could double every day. So we see mathematically that because of the nature that, maybe we'll discuss as we're looking at some of these graphics of the virus and the exponential infection level, that, these numbers could become millions. And, we'll look at the New York Times graphics and various things where they do actually expect, some people are saying the numbers could be much higher. And some people, they're expecting that a good percentage of all of humanity will eventually get infected. And you'll see what they're talking about, flattening the curve or whatever. We'll look at all of that. But you see in the bottom right-hand corner, there you have total deaths, and also notice the total recover. So in the beginning, almost, all the deaths were in China. Now Italy, there's a lot of deaths. Iran, Spain already has close to 200 deaths. France. So God forbid, they're predicting that basically what's happened in Italy and China could happen anywhere in the world, and you could start seeing a whole lot of deaths. So, these type numbers, and these numbers could increase. Like, we're going to look more and see, like, God forbid, could this be, like one of the biggest mass casualty events that most people will see in their lifetime? And God forbid, we're going to be talking about coronavirus the next few months, but we're going to be talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people dead from it, God forbid. So, saying that's why we're closed down. That's how the fear level out there. People are talking about mass casualty event where this will continue. You see here, it started in mainland China, and now look on February, the other list, and it's almost reaching exponential increase. And, if it reached exponential increase, like, they could go up from 300,000 to, 500,000, over 1 million in a week. And in 2 weeks, it could be 10 million. And, like in a month, it could be half of the world. And as I said, if it's like a 2% death rate, God forbid, of the people who get it, you're talking a mass casualty event. So, Jennifer, if you want did you have anything to comment on this John Hopkins display before I move on to the next one?
No, thanks for sharing. It's very interesting. I think the low numbers out of China is honestly a bit suspicious. They have much higher population density. And I have a hard time imagining how they would have been able to stop it after it had been going for so long. So that's probably good news.
Yeah, we're going to get into the spread and say, like, did China successfully stop its spread? Here's another graphic that, so if you're looking at cumulative cases, that curve is, it's going up quick, and we're going to look more and more of this data. But, like, people are extremely scared, and, saying, like, if we weren't taking these measures, these numbers could be going up much, much quicker. And you look by date that, someday they're saying February 12th, they think that there were 15,000 cases confirmed. And you're talking yesterday, 2 days ago, over 10,000 cases. And, God forbid, at 2% death rate, that means, God forbid, 200 people were given the death sentence of coronavirus, 2 days ago. And yesterday, 100 people were given the death sentence of coronavirus. Right?
Well, it depends if it's valid information. There's threads on 4chan saying the whole thing is a hoax because nobody can find anybody who's actually can be confirmed to have been infected with this thing. So it's something to keep in mind. I haven't been able to validate it, but like I said, it's hard to validate any of this stuff, which is really part of the problem is causing this mass hysteria, as evidenced by the toilet paper thing.
Yeah, well, I was saying that is the mainstream position of the majority of elites, and hence why things are closed down. So here, I'm going to put that link in the chat in a second. So I'm not an expert on genetics, but I guess, this is just in the last few months. And, so what was the original coronavirus has already came into, tens or hundreds of slight variant viruses. and you could see like how it's mutating or advancing as it's spreading across the globe. I don't know if you have any expertise in these. I was actually thinking about reaching out to JF and asking him if he would come on my show and talk about coronavirus.
I don't think what you'd need to be an expert in this type of thing is epidemiology, which is essentially down to modeling. The problem with this virus is that they don't really know much about it. Like everything they know about it comes out after, possibly if this thing was released from some sort of secret lab, whatever information the lab had, if they gave it up, would be sort of an admission of guilt of having been responsible or negligent in the leaking of the virus. So there's a bit of an issue. Like they're not even sure how this thing is transmissible. They just are pretty sure that it transmits very easily.
Yeah, so here's the last one of the Hill link, and this one I guess just made by a 17-year-old kid, but it came to be very popular because it has easy to see. So you got confirmed cases, deceased, people in serious condition. I don't know what percent of those, God forbid, are dying, or we'll see what that means, the type of serious conditions that are, or how coronavirus turns into death. And about half of the people have recovered, and you can see that like in China, there's still 3,500 people in serious condition. Italy, 1,500. In the U.S., there's changing, different figures on different ones. 48 deaths, by state. So Michigan, had already been at like 25 earlier. New York is over 600. The United States has 2 deceased. California, Florida has 4 deceased. And even Canada, you're seeing that there's only been 1 deceased in British Columbia. Ontario's got over 100 cases. Alberta, 40 cases. So, it's slowly spreading across the world. And the fear is, God forbid that what's happening in Italy and China could happen anywhere. And so, here's the New York Times, which thank God I'm now behind the paywall. My mother subscribes, so I'm able to have an account on hers. But the coronavirus, they're making their coverage free. So if you look here, this graphic, each dot is a day. And the color represents up to 10 cases to 100 cases to 1,000 cases to more. So the darkest blue. So in mainland China, you had a multiple week period where thousands of people were becoming infected every day. And you say, if God forbid, about 2% of those people are dying, that means 20 people a day were being given a death sentence. And some of those days it could have been in the multiple thousands. Italy had a period in the thousands every day. Iran, the U.S. as of now has been able to keep it under the thousands of people being infected every day. So far, most countries have been able to. Spain and France, even without thousands of people being infected every day, just hundreds, it's still turning into a mass casualty event. So, you could see the seriousness of this, and just going across all these various countries that it seems to be a global pandemic. So let's look at some of these graphics. What is coronavirus? So kind of this graphic of these. But, JF did a show on this at the beginning. It's got kind of these AIDS-type spiked proteins that a lot of viruses do that help it stick other cells. One of these spikes will catch on to a cell, a receptor cell on the outside of a vulnerable cell. Through that, it will be able to enter. Usually it's coming through the eyes, nose, mouth. It attaches the cells in the airway, specifically this protein called ACE2. So there's a certain protein the ACE2 that is the receptor of the coronavirus. And then from there, the viral RNA will be released, and that viral RNA will enter, I guess they have their own protein. So their own protein the coronavirus has a protein that makes these RNA, and those RNA will be able to hijack the cell's nucleus and get the cell to reproduce its RNA, I guess, if it doesn't have DNA for it. So if anyone studied like basic biology, and like you might even cover this in like elementary school biology on a very simple level, higher level like biochemistry, might even have like the elements and once the cell has taken over the cell, then it produces a whole bunch of viruses, and the viruses and its expansive effect more and more. The affected cell can release millions of copies of the virus before the cell finally breaks down and die. The virus can infect nearby cells or end up in droplets that escape the lungs. The immune response, most COVID-19 infections cause a fever as the immune system fights to clear the virus. In several cases, the immune system can overreact and start attacking lung cells. The lungs become obstructed with fluid and dying cells, making it difficult to breathe. A small percentage of infections can lead to acute respiratory distress syndrome and possibly death. That's in relation possibly to the fibrillators. If you're hearing in the news, like we need more fibrillators. So coughing.
I sent you a link if there's some people in the chat who are doubting the existence of viruses, but I've sent you a link if you want to load it up of scanning tunneling microscope displaying a virus. I think it would be pretty hard to fake. So there's some pretty good images there. A scanning tunneling microscope is essentially the best we can get. We can actually get pretty close to the atomic level with those because they're actually using quantum effects from electrons to render those images.
Yeah, I wanted to cover the mainstream scientific opinion of the elites that are closing down institutions, and then afterwards we could discuss other theories.
This is the mainstream theory, Doooovid.
Yeah, no. So I'll just go with the New York Times now. So leaving the body, coughing and sneezing can expel virus-laden droplets onto nearby people or surfaces where the virus can remain infectious for several hours to several days. Protecting, and then those cells that have been left in public will eventually find their way to other people until, God forbid, we all have coronavirus and it kills us all, God forbid. So a possible future vaccine could help the body produce antibodies that target the virus and prevent it from infecting human cells. Flu vaccine works in a similar way, but antibodies generated from flu vaccine do not protect in various things. So that's let me finish this. So I guess if you want to bring someone else on, that's fine. That's fine. Although let me completely finish this overview.
He's not available yet. He's a streamer. He just wanted to pop in, but he's not available yet. I just wanted to know if I could send him the link.
Yeah, I'll probably be like 15 more minutes. Okay, so
sounds good.
Let's I'm sorry to look clear. So there's sorry about the dead time here. There was another article. So just read here: how to protect yourself, prepare for coronavirus. If you feel sick, stay home, wash your hands from soap, wash them again, stay informed. Children, keep calm. Flu shot, don't stockpile masks. Do stockpile groceries, medicine, resources. The common symptoms. So people could probably read through the basic things. I thought they had a nice graphic. Okay, here it was. What does the coronavirus do to the body? So Coronavirus infection proliferate around the world. How does it cause infection? So the virus is spread through droplets transmitted in the air from coughing or sneezing, which people nearby can take in through their nose, mouths, or eyes, hence restricting all this activity. The viral particles in these droplets travel quickly to the back of your nasal passages to the mucous membranes of the back of your throat, attaching a particular receptor in cells beginning there. Coronal particles have spike proteins sticking out from their surfaces, and these spikes hook onto the cell membranes, allowing the viral's genetic material to enter the human cell. The genetic material proceeds to hijack the metabolism of the cell and say, in effect, don't do your usual job. Your job now is to help me multiply and make the virus. So how does this cause respiratory problems? As copies of the virus multiply, they burst out to infect neighboring cells. The symptoms often start in the back of the throat with a sore throat and dry cough. The virus then crawls progressively down the bronchial tubes. When the virus reaches the lungs, their mucous membranes become inflamed. They can damage the alveoli or lung sacs, and they have to work harder to carry out the function of supplying oxygen to the blood that circulate throughout our body and removing carbon dioxide from the blood so it can be exhaled. If you get swelling there, it makes it that much more difficult for oxygen to swim across the mucous membrane. The swelling and the impaired flow of oxygen can cause those areas of the lungs to fill with fluid, pus, and dead cells. Pneumonia, infection in the lung can occur. Some people have so much trouble breathing that they need to be put on a ventilator, and in worst cases, known as acute respiratory distress syndrome, the lungs fill up with so much fluid that no amount of breathing support can help, and God forbid the patient dies. So what trajectory does the virus take in the lungs? Professor Chicago School of Medicine examined pathology reports from China, said the virus appears to start in the peripheral areas on both sides of the lung and can take a while to reach the upper respiratory tract, the trachea, and other central airways. The pattern helps explains why in Wuhan, where the outbreak began, many of the earliest cases were not identified immediately. The initial testing regimen in many Chinese hospitals did not always detect information in peripheral lungs. So some people with symptoms were sent home without treatment. So it goes on. So are the lungs the only part of the body infected? So you could see some CT scans of coronavirus, and God forbid what it did to the person's lungs. The infection can spread through the mucous membrane from the nose down to the rectum. So while the virus appears to zero in on the lungs, it may also be able to infect cells in the gastrointestinal system. And, so why do some people get very ill, but most don't? About 80% of the people infected with the new coronavirus have relatively mild symptoms, but 20% of the people become more seriously ill, and about 2% of patients die. Experts say the effects appear to depend on how robust or weakened a person's immune system is. Older people or those with underlying health issues like diabetes or other chronic illness are more likely to develop severe symptoms. I'm not sure if I've seen a nice chart, but it said, like, God forbid. I just X that out. God forbid that if older people have an extremely severe chance of death, like 14-50%, where younger people's like 0.1%, almost comparable to the flu. So let me just pop up the New York Times map, and we'll see their numbers. It's slowly ticking up. God forbid it's like 10 higher than when I checked an hour ago. You see those numbers. Italy 21,000. Saying it was only 10,000 a few days ago. That's doubling. That's exponential growth. The power of mathematics and exponential growth of that you could see in all these cities. And we saw this earlier, and that's the power of exponential growth. And here in the U.S., 600 now in Washington, 2,500 across the U.S., 25 in Michigan. Now, almost every state, already 4 in Montana. So pretty crazy. What do you got to say? Sorry, I wasn't checking the chat either. So hopefully
Oh, it's no problem. I think it's very interesting opportunity to study a lot of things we probably wouldn't be able to study otherwise, and it's sort of bringing out some of the paranoid and conspiratorial thinking that's so common on YouTube, especially in our circles. People are denying the very existence of quantum effects. They're denying that scanning tunneling microscopes work. I've shared a link there on a Pinterest in the chat that I think is a pretty clear proof that scanning tunneling microscopes are real. You got the basic shape of a virus there. So it's got the little legs on it that Doooovid was describing before, and a head. So I frankly don't know how this could be faked, but anything's possible. But I do understand the mechanics of it, so it seems real to me.
Well, I mean, it could obviously be overreaction. And you're saying, okay, it's exponential growth. And you're saying if it got to, these numbers could get extremely high quickly. And you're saying the number of casualties could start getting extremely high everywhere. And certainly, okay, it's unclear. Like it's good to be a skeptic. And if you're not scientifically knowledgeable, do you trust experts? And someone's making the difference, kind of like Biden, who's kind of like, we're going to trust the experts, versus Trump, who, if he can't understand it, he's not necessarily just going to trust the experts because he doesn't understand what they're saying. And, usually deep scientific truths have some basic intuition to them that they should make sense at all levels, although some complicated concepts are counterintuitive. So, I feel like, President Trump's an intelligent man, knowledgeable at many things. Maybe he never thought so much about this. He had a tendency towards cleanliness. I always had a bent towards cleanliness and health. I thought about becoming a doctor. My father's a doctor. I know, go to synagogue. The synagogues I go to and the Indian temples I go to, all of them have many doctors in them. I volunteered in an emergency room, public relations, and in a busy synagogue in New York, and public events, chess coaching. I'm very careful about cleanliness. I try to avoid public restrooms. I wash my hands very often. I try to avoid touching dirty things, or I know the order, kind of like how to be a clean person in a dirty world, just like it's hard to be a righteous person in an unrighteous world. It's hard to be a clean person in a dirty world, but that's something that I've been working on. Like I assume, Jennifer, naturally, tendency to, I want to be a clean person even in a dirty world. And that, when you're looking at something like coronavirus or virus spreading, that most of the measures are simple cleanliness things that people like me generally do anyways.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. Not just cleanliness, but also just mental health. Because when your mental health is low, unfortunately, your physical health is not far behind. So someone in the chat, I think this is a troll, Jay Smith, is saying that you can't blindly trust what you see. I'm not blindly trusting it. I validated this. I used to work in this field. I've actually seen scientific results from scanning tunneling microscopes before in more than one type of application. So 3D images from a microscope, really? Why is that so hard to believe? That would be like, I'm sure people have heard of 3D printers so far. So if you looked at something that came out of a 3D printer, would you now say that it's not really a printer because it's in 3 dimensions? I don't think so. So try actually making an argument here instead of just trying to spread doubt. You're spreading paranoia and confusion in the chat. You should be asking questions rather than making these assertions that you have no way of substantiating because you do not have a background in this field.
I was thinking, there's going to be some good societal things, and it could be, you see the level of societal distrust and the karma of just, okay, like we need to reset, society, collective society, collective karma of mankind was leading us off of a cliff. And, God forbid, only the fear of death caused by coronavirus could get us to slow down. And, we're not necessarily slowing down because we care about each other. We're slowing down because we care about ourselves and we're scared of death. But it's pretty, unprecedented. I think that's the right word. That this has possibly never happened in history. This kind of like global shutdown, pandemic, fear. Like we should talk about the science, and we should talk about why bacteria is generally, viruses is generally in pandemics is generally understood from the evolutionary nature, similar to things like vaccines, where it's like, oh my god, next thing you know, the government's going to forcibly inject some poison in me and claim that they're doing it in order to heal me. That's largely based on evolutionary medicine. We had a measles scare recently, which God forbid hit the Orthodox Jewish community. Measles is actually much more contagious than coronavirus or most other virus. Measles is extremely contagious, but that did affect people, and the government started instituting $1,000 fines for people, closing down places, schools that had students in them that hadn't had their measles shot, and so there should be some skepticism, but the level of are you rejecting science? Are you kind of just trolling? You're just causing problems? Do you really want to learn something, or do you want to assess based on your knowledge level of science and your abilities? Okay, like I really care about this. I want to know more, and I'm willing to learn about science in order to understand these things better, or to say that you want to make the best decisions you can with your knowledge level that's capable, based on your level and understanding of science. But wasting time or whatever isn't going to benefit anybody. So we're here where we could try to explain the science behind what's going on, so people could understand it better, whatever their level of understanding. That some people might have PhD level understandings of multiple fields of science. Some people might have less than a high school understanding of the multiple fields of science. But whatever your level is, that you understand it better, and you'll be able to make more informed, better decisions based on understanding it better.
Yeah, that's really what we need right now, is a calm and sober tone to approach these things, not just repeating the last talking point that we heard on a random conspiracy live stream. Ahem. So I've sent the link to Davis Aurini. He wanted to pop on. You can add him whenever you want. He says he's available. Oh, there he is. Nice to see you, Davis. You're muted.
Hey, Mr. Aurini, I think we met on Luke Ford's stream before.
Way back when.
I guess you and Jennifer have known for each other for a while too. We've been streaming together for about a year, and decided to do a special coronavirus special. And God forbid, everything near me closed down just this last day. My regular activities, yoga classes. Like Israel, in Spain, in Europe, it's much worse than here, where you can't even have anything. Please, join in. I guess you're a seasoned streamer.
I think that's one of the major things that we can be doing as streamers right now. Like I normally stream twice a week. I've upped it to 3 times a week, just because as individuals, the thing that we can do to help this is quarantine ourselves as much as possible. And as streamers, what we can do is provide entertainment, provide some company for people while they're sitting at home alone during this period.
You can even teach people how to stream. Tomorrow we do the week in review. We're going to show like the Biden disaster of how poorly his streaming went. But like we're prepared for the streaming, so we could use it to get useful information, talk to people, and then other people who aren't used to streaming, maybe walk them through it and be patient with their initial fumbling. And when I started the stream, I read a whole bunch of places of worship that I typically go to, and a lot of them have switched to streaming. Like, so the Orthodox Jewish places aren't going to stream Sabbath services, but the secular Jewish places are streaming Sabbath services. The yoga places are streaming. The Catholic, everybody's streaming now. And so those who are prepared for it, are going to be a little better off than those who it's their first time doing it.
The big thing is just about flattening the infection curve and keeping it below the hospitalization capacity, right? Like if everybody catches coronavirus all at once, you get a really tight curve and it overwhelms healthcare. If you flatten it out, delay how long it takes for people to get infected, then the hospitals can deal with it better.
And I forgot to show that article. I wanted to cover kind of like the mainstream accepted evolutionary science perspective of consensus among elites. And it's also ironic that, can you remember when there's been such a consensus among elites?
That's the thing. Look at what this is what I was saying two months ago. Look at what they do, not what they say. 2 months ago, I was saying this is not SARS, this is not swine flu. This thing is actually pretty darn serious. Just look at what they're doing. And and we've had 2 months to prepare for it. Hopefully, people were preparing for it. Now, that said, it's not that bad, okay? It's way worse than the flu, but it is not Ebola running rampant. I'll tell you, here in North America, the biggest threat from this is the panic, is people overreacting to it. So that's the thing to look out for. Prepare, try and self-quarantine, but don't go into a panic about the whole thing.
Well, and just shutting down, stopping. There's one thing like panicking, like what are people going to do? But you're saying we just can't gather anymore. So people are panicking, but at least if they're privately panicking, they're not spreading the virus. They might be panicking. Here's the New York Times visual on this kind of idea, flatten the curve. And here, God forbid, this is what they're saying, that they would predict that if we did nothing, there would be about 10 million infections at peak, and about 1 million people would die. And then they have this visuals that by taking earlier intervention, it will limit this initial peak. But unfortunately, you can't just limit it. It will, so to say, flatten. So we're going to have a longer, drawn-out cases of over a longer period of time. And that the benefit, multiple. One is that, so there's two theories. One is that you don't actually limit the amount of the actual virus, that it just flattens it out and happens over a longer period of time. But that's beneficial to society because you don't have overcrowding of hospitals and mass panic because it's spread out over a longer period of time. And there's also possible diminishment. Some of this like herd mentality in various things that could explain. I don't know if you're an expert in this, because I think the viruses are largely, mysterious. Like, what does it mean to be cured? What does it mean to be end? Like, how come just like everyone doesn't get it, or the spreading? And is it going to come back from now till forever, like influenza? That God forbid, the Spanish influenza in 1918 that killed over 20 million people, but in reality, influenza is still around and didn't go anywhere. And then God forbid, I know some of the circles me and you have debated, and you think like World War II, and I remember these people telling me like it was typhus. Like, God forbid, like if people died, they died of typhus. And
maybe we could look at very common virus. I believe the herpes simplex is the virus. Cold sores. So how does that work? I think something like 80% plus of people have it on their face. And usually what will happen is there'll be some breakouts and eventually less breakouts. So there's like a sort of immunity that evolves if you're healthy. If you're not, they can just keep coming back anytime you have a stress response. So maybe it is really something where it's almost like the virus becomes part of your DNA code if you contract it.
Herpes actually used to be really brutal about like 400 or 500 years ago. It would be sores all over your body that would be breaking out. And what's happened is there's been a coevolution with the virus and with humans to coexist, more or less. So at this point, herpes is it's unsightly, but it's not the same threat that it was 500 years ago. So if this is the sort of thing that persists, you'll likely have a coevolution there as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, Davis. I've never heard that before. Do you have any links we could take a look at about this ancient herpes? First I heard
goodness, not offhand. That's something I read years and years and years ago.
I do. Ironically, they're offering a course from Hong Kong University right now on epidemics, and I was watching some of the videos right before we streamed, but they have a history of viruses and the flu and the evolutionary understanding that viruses have existed, like Jean-Francois Greppi's hypothesis of the revolutionary phenotype, that in essence we were viruses, that we evolved from viruses and they're still around, even though but whatever the case, viruses are one of the very oldest things that have existed on Earth, but they have changed. And around the time when humans started agriculture and we started massing in centers and stopped being mobile, was the time where viruses and humans and then the animals, our livestock, started co-evolving. So when we were hunter-gatherers and there was only 20-30 of us wandering around, that was too mobile. And also, like the buffalo and the cattle and the camel, there might occasionally be pandemics, but generally because they were mobile, the social distancing. But it was only when we started settling down that we became more susceptible to it, and there's this coevolution. And then specifically with livestock, and I think there was case I was just reading about where like they killed 4 million cattle in Europe or something a few years ago because there was a virus, and then it's spreading to humans largely from eating that meat. So like the biological, the evolutionary origins, and maybe it's just like the karmatic origins of something, like like what kind of like force, what understanding do these viruses mean. And a lot of times, like I'm vegetarian, and a lot of vegetarians are less likely to be infected by these viruses and flus. Coronavirus is unclear. It looks like it could be just as dangerous to vegetarians as non-vegetarians, although most people believe that it was an animal virus that was common in either the pangolin and bats, and through the Wuhan market eventually caught onto humans and infected us. And whether there was some sort of mutation, maybe it happened in the pangolin, and then someone ate a pangolin, or somehow through the market the pangolin virus got to a man and then started spreading, or God forbid, maybe someone started with a virus from either a bat or a pangolin and genetically modified it as they showed that basically this new virus has God forbid kind of like the best qualities of an AIDS virus and the best quality of like the old SARS virus, making it much more susceptible, and making theories about genetic modification. But either way, you're saying these are viruses that have been along in, according to evolution, maybe even billions of years, and have been carried in a rather benign way through animal species. And when it hopped to humans, it became deadly.
I mean, it might have been deadly for the animals. How would we know?
Well, they believe it wasn't deadly for the animal. So you never had a mass death of pangolin from this virus, that the pangolin carry it. Maybe it causes some problems, but it's some sort of benign, I mean, maybe not benign relationship, but where the virus could just survive in the lungs, respiratory system of the pangolin, enough to keep the virus alive and not to do enough harm to the animal, so that this relationship could have even carried on thousands, tens of thousands of years.
Yeah, well, maybe what's happened. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, a virus doesn't benefit if it kills off 100% of the host, right? It wants a host that it can continually it's like Las Vegas, right? You don't want to bleed the people dry. You just want to take enough and let them have fun so they come back next year.
But I mean, in theory, though, this is why we're quarantined, because, like, yes, this coronavirus is just going to keep on replicating until it kills everybody, and like that's what we're afraid of.
Well, no, even like worst case scenario, everybody gets it. It's like the death rate is like 1 to 3%. something like that. Might be a lot lower.
Because it seems to be saying that death is caused by overreaction of the immune system, that the virus just continuing to replicate and spread isn't what causes the death. It's the overreaction in the lungs of
Well,
the
yeah,
immune
it's the
system.
secondary. Like when you have the virus, you're going to get pneumonia. It makes you vulnerable to other things, which is what winds up killing you. Which is also why the flatten the curve principle, because pneumonia is first of all, most people, if you get pneumonia, you will probably survive. All right, very good chance you'll survive. If on top of that you have medical treatment from a hospital, even better chance of surviving. And so this is why the worry is overwhelming healthcare, so that people that are having these secondary infections can't receive proper treatment. So again, like the virus itself is not going to kill it. Even if there was no medical treatment, 100% of people got infected, there's no quarantine whatsoever, the vast, vast majority of people will still be alive in a couple of years' time. It's that we don't want to lose that 1 to 3%. And even that's 1 to 3% of people dying that have been diagnosed with it. There's a lot of people that have had coronavirus and they just didn't go to the hospital, so there's no record of them having it. The bigger concern is the social, the economic implications of all of this. Is the panicking going to crash the system? Because crashing the economic system is going to harm a lot more people than this virus will.
Well, I want to mention one thing quick. First, do you have a background in science?
Not medical science, no.
I mean, you took like you took basic physics and calculus.
Yes, calculus, programming.
Okay, so I was
statistics. Yes, so I know statistics. I don't know the medical sciences. I can deal with a sucking chest wound, but when it comes to statistics, yes.
Okay, great. Because me and Jennifer, what we every week, in one of our most common points of argument and debate is free will. What exactly does free will mean? Does it exist? The theological implications. And it seems like, to understand this virus from the mainstream biological, maybe even deterministic, this virus is basically has no free will, so to say. It's just a organism that bounces around, and if it recepts to a certain type protein, gets in, starts replicating again and again and again until it gets kicked out of the body, through mucus or whatever, and then it just floats in the air, these millions of it, till it dies, or perchance it happens to through random physics bounce and make it onto something that carries, like a platform that will eventually be touched by a human, that maybe will eventually touch their face or mouth, that this virus will eventually find this protein receptor to then replicate a whole bunch of more times and then repeat the process. So it's pretty cold-blooded. There's no free will or decision-making processes. And in terms like the science, understanding why we're quarantining and why we're shutting down activities and not having gatherings of more than so many people, depending on where you're at, is just to the pure randomness of it, that someone gets it, they could have possibly hundreds of millions, maybe even billions and billions of these coronavirus could replicate in them. They could cough, they could sneeze, and they could go out into the vicinity of 5-10 feet away from the person. They could get on things. It's been tested. It could live on plastic surfaces, maybe cell phones for a few days, cardboard, various things, and then God forbid you touched it or is in the air, and or if you directly inhale it, and repeat. I mean, that basically how you understand it.
Sorry, what? What's the question?
Well, I mean, if you appreciate kind of my mechanistic evolutionary understanding, and then obviously these viruses, because they replicate so fast, and like one of them could turn into millions of them, in even.
But a virus is nothing but a little bit of coding in a protein shell to protect it from the environment. And if it gets inside of a cell, it co-opts the cell's natural reproductive process to produce more copies of itself rather than copies of the cell, which is what the cell is supposed to be doing.
And this one seems to very specific to like a certain protein that's only found in the respiratory tract. So saying that like this virus only successfully reproduces, kind of like your JF life just means a reproduction unit, and the whole purpose of this is to reproduce. So it just puts out millions and millions, and its only chance of reproducing is randomly, if through no action of its own, but through the action of other things, it ends up in the respiratory tract of another human in order that it could reproduce again. But because the number game, that one of them, if they successfully find this protein in large body of a human that might have millions and millions of these proteins, they could reproduce billions of times, and that's also why we're quarantined, because one person with the coronavirus could infect in theory millions of people.
I think what happens is once the virus is contracted, eventually there's an immune response that gets triggered, and the symptoms come about largely due to the immune response not functioning exactly the way that it's supposed to. So this could offer an answer as to the biological pathway for some of these genetic changes that happens, i.e. the virus comes in, starts to, reformat your cells, your immune system kicks in, starts to attack the virus, and maybe it's unable to fully neutralize it, but it can get it down to a level where it doesn't trigger another immune response, which would keep it in a sort of symbiosis with the body. And it was interesting what Davis said earlier about the cold sores, how that used to be way worse. The herpes simplex virus used to be way worse. Maybe what happens is that we sort of evolve, quote unquote, not in the, I don't want to say evolve as in the sense of a quantum state transition, but we change enough to deal with it so that we sort of minimize the effects, but we're unable to fully neutralize the effects. And so if it came from this other species, because the virus has been with that species for longer, it's undergone like a similar thing as the herpes simplex did with us. It's no longer mortal for the species, but because we have no previous exposure to it, we would be far more vulnerable for these overreactions until things settle down when the immune system responds.
So if you guys could carry this on, if you might take my medicine, maybe take a 5-minute break if you want to talk about this and the economic impacts. I appreciate you, Davis, coming on my stream. I've been listening to you off and on, largely through Luke Ford, because he's the one who bought me the microphone and taught me about streaming. But I think from the first time I was streaming, I saw you around. So props. I'm going to take my medicine. Be back in a minute.
Sure thing. There's actually a theory out there that the E. coli in our gut started off as an infectious virus. Now, at this point, you require E. coli. You will get sick with it. Like there's a whole bunch of bacteria and whatnot living inside of you that you need. And there's speculation that a lot of these bacteria started off as an invasive disease, and just that we both modified over time.
Yeah, that's what they mean by survival of the fittest, right? Because it's essentially a situation of life being evolved more or less to be able to handle these things that are coming in. So there was some fighting going on in the chat earlier about whether viruses were alive or not, and I thought it was a bit of a silly semantic point of divergence. But what might not be silly is to think of animals and viruses as part of a larger biome, the same way that you can look at bees and the flowers that they pollinate as part of a big biome, because one doesn't really work without the other. So it may end up being the same, that this human genetic evolution or changes to the genetic code are actually driven by these responses to viruses.
Exactly. It's a negotiation. So like if you were to ask the question, which is more evolutionarily successful, Corona-chan or the regular flu, you'd say the regular flu, because even though the regular flu does kill people every year, it's so few that nobody cares about it. And so we do very, very little to try and prevent the flu. Whereas something like Corona-chan is serious enough that it's provoking a major response in us to try and halt it. So yeah, if Corona-chan continues to be a thing year to year, you can anticipate the fact that it's going to be far less deadly in years to come. Same thing with the Black Death. The first time the Black Death hit, it was terrible, but each subsequent plague was less and less harmful to the population. Viruses don't spread if they kill you.
Yeah, that reminds me of something I read, that there was some sort of self-neutralizing effect because the super virulent and deadly strains don't ever have much of a chance to get communicated, so they end up just sort of extinguishing themselves. And I guess we kind of have a huge tolerance for carrying these massive viral loads, even to the point where they may actually be a necessary part of our evolutionary process.
Well, that's the nasty thing about Corona-chan, is the long latency period where it's still infectious. It's like what, a week or two that you have it, and you can infect other people, and you don't even know. So that's why it's a particularly nasty one.
Yeah, exactly. It's particularly detrimental to the lungs, but it takes a really long time to manifest an immune response, which is, I think, part of the reason why people are speculating that it's actually engineered for that purpose, because to actually get something that could be deadly on a mass scale, you'd need to sort of go around the normal pathways of infectious communicability, because normally there's this limitation of something being super deadly having a limited opportunity to spread for that very reason.
Now, I will say, though, that if it is a manufactured virus, I don't think it was an intentional attack, simply because, like, look at the fallout from all of this. Additionally, our typical go-to villain is the globalists, right? One of the effects of a plague is it increases a person's disgust reflex. And people with very high disgust reflexes are not xenophiliac. And so this would be the exact opposite of what the globalists would want. This would, like, one of the consequences of this virus is going to be more nationalism, is going to be more xenophobia, is going to be a stronger disgust reflex for those that make it through.
Yeah, what I've been hearing is it's essentially like a stress test to see whether people will accept martial law as a part of some plan for mass force vaccinations that will lead to sterility, as well as a possible depopulation program. So again, I can't validate any of these theories. This is just what's floating around. People are pretty paranoid. That
strikes me as paranoia. It's look at what they're actually doing. These people have no clue whatsoever. Now, the interesting thing about it, too, is that it's the Asian countries with strong cultures that are going to, I think they've already beaten it in China. Whereas here, because of the radical individualism, because of the lack of culture, the lack of social trust, and all the multiculturalism they've been shoving down our throats, we're not going to unite and have an organized response to this. So thinking like this is part of some agenda, look at the people in power. They are running around like chickens with their heads cut off. They have no idea what's going on.
I guess there's been a fair bit of losses to the value of stocks, so it's possible that this coronavirus scare is something to distract from all the money that's been lost in the stock market and quantitative easing that they're doing. But again, that's speculation. You get to a point where, you're just looking at a bunch of information trying to draw a narrative. So the conspiratorial thinking is kind of natural, I think, for humans to do that. So I'm honestly not sure which is scarier, whether it was intentional or by accident. I actually think that if it was by accident, it's even scarier, because you're talking about a level of incompetence that's like mind-meltingly staggering.
Well, and that's part of listen, I think everybody here knows the term conspiracy theory was invented by the CIA, right? No, you're fine. We all know it was invented by the CIA. That being said, there is a phenomenon of the conspiracy theorist where it's comforting to imagine that there is some centralized plan, even if it's by villains, because the alternative, that we have no idea what we're doing, and the people in power, their average IQ is 115. They're really not that bright. They have no idea what the heck they're doing. That's terrifying. And that's the reality of things. Like, yes, there are conspiracies, but when you're looking at conspiracy, you always have to ask qui bono, right? Like, what is the benefit of this? How does this help anybody? How much would it cost to pull off this conspiracy versus what's the benefit of this conspiracy? And so the consequence of Corona Chan is crashing the world economy and creating a lot more xenophobia and nationalism the world over. So how would that benefit the globalists, right? Like, now, if the left were speculating that
I mentioned right before you came on that it's these international state of emergency. You think, like, God forbid, like Richard Spencer by Texas and Charlottesville, state of emergency. Now your gathering has become illegal, and the government have the right to force you away because it's a state of emergency, and they've suspended our usual constitutional right to assemble. So,
well, as they should.
So I was saying globally, that's already happened. That basically almost every nation across the world has exercised this option of declaring a state of emergency, which legally has the effect of allowing the government to infringe upon our usual rights and civil liberties that they're not allowed to do except because we're in a state of emergency. And as of now, that only means preventing us from assembling in large crowds, which is normally a civil liberty. But in Israel now that Netanyahu said we're going to track people, they're going to monitor people and see where they go to and who they speak to, and does Trump and to other people, and basically saying, like, there wasn't a scenario with like Trump in normal politics to your 1984 Big Brother state, but coronavirus could provide that platform, and it's just your typical elites that will be fully put, God forbid, to be permanent oligarchs from the decision that, God forbid, once they no longer allow us to assemble and already take the ability to monitor everything that we do, that they're never going to give that back.
They already have that.
But there's restrictions on it.
No, dude, they record absolutely everything, track where you go. They can data analyze, figure out who your close friends are, look at who you talk with on the internet. The only saving grace is that the people in charge are too stupid to really exploit this. So they've already got all of this. Corona Chan doesn't benefit them. The only conspiracy I would buy with Corona Chan is secret moon Nazis are trying to turn everybody on Earth racist, and Corona Chan is their tool for doing that. Moon Nazis behind Corona Chan I could buy. Globalists, they already have it in the bag. Why would they screw it up with this?
I could say that, there's not...
Because they're not that smart and they're bored.
It seems unlikely that anyone would have completely pre-planned and be acting in this conspiracy, although it's possible because there might be, huge players of, pharmaceuticals and billionaire networks working together that thought through and planned this for, decades. And then, in a decade from now, you're going to see like them and their crew of oligarchs are running the whole world. It's possible you could design some sort of science fiction, or maybe, I haven't seen anyone, really like connecting dots and names. So you could look at motive, who might benefit, like Amazon. Someone just showed me Whole Foods now. Whole Foods delivers. You could get Whole Foods, they deliver within 2 hours now. I was just about to do it. And if you order over $35 and you're an Amazon Prime customer, delivery is free. So you could see the social media, could largely just take over life and say, like, okay, you're not going to get together anymore. You're not going to be able to organize through the venues that you had previously been able to organize through. And there's just going to be a complete restructuring, and it's largely going to be controlled through social media. But like the likelihood, like Peter Thiel and Bilderbergs and Chinese Chicoms would have got together and hatched a conspiracy and plotted it out, and it's just a matter of months now where the market keeps on tumbling, and the new world order of elites officially become oligarchs of the world. I'm skeptical.
And honestly, when you look at the things that are happening, censorship on YouTube, the agenda behind every single sports ball commercial, there's an interplay between the populace and the ruled. People get the government they deserve, right? And the reason that every other Super Bowl commercial has a gay couple with an adopted multiracial son is because we've got garbage people, right? And the way to combat it is just stop being garbage people, and then this garbage they're selling no longer sells. So the solutions are a lot simpler.
It was interesting. If you're saying it's a pushback against multiculturalism, diversity, and open borders, that say that the political means, it seemed that open borders was winning, even though there's rising voices against it. But if you're saying it's against natural law, and I was watching the science, and they say the reason we have coronavirus is because we broke natural law by China. I guess they actually farm these animals there, where some might be genetically modified, some of them might just be farmed, but like pangolin, these various animals that they basically just breed them in cages and sell them for food and various things. And you're saying that because it's unnatural, what they were doing, that's what caused the virus to move over from them to man, and that's why we're dying en masse. But saying that there's some sort of natural law here that is being balanced out. So you just got look at the forces.
Well, it's even simpler than that. It's the natural law.
But you connect it to immigration. I was saying, when you were talking, if you multiculturalism, immigration, so multicultural immigration is so bad that it's literally killing us.
And the reason that the immigration problem in the United States would not exist if people would stop buying houses from construction companies that hire illegal workers.
But saying coronavirus, they're saying if there were less immigration, less travel, less migration, coronavirus would be much slower, or possibly not effective at all.
Exactly. And if people were responsible and thought about their neighbors, like right now in Florida, I've got a friend that's a nurse at a hospital. They are absolutely overwhelmed in Florida. They're working 12-hour shifts, no breaks, just go, go, go. Meanwhile, this weekend, all of the college kids are out partying, right? No social responsibility, no consideration that, maybe I'm a college kid, I can survive it, but my grandma can't, so maybe I should be limiting no social responsibility, no consideration of others, no empathy. Just everybody's out to get theirs. And that's why it's going to hit us bad. And it's the same thing with the multiculturalism immigration. If people would have some standards and not go for the cheapest, easiest solution and then just look the other way, then a lot of the stuff wouldn't be happening. It's like buying stolen goods. If you buy stolen goods, you're supporting theft. So don't complain when your house gets broken into.
And just as you said that, I was thinking the generational politics might factor in, because God forbid, coronavirus is much more dangerous to older people with pre-existing conditions. As we're younger people, it is basically like the flu. They have 1 in 1,000 less chance of dying from it, and older people could have as much as a 15% chance in dealing with it. Therefore, the older generation will support more draconian governmental measures to enforce slowing its spread, as where the younger generation, just like, this is ridiculous. Why are you taking our freedoms away, for this, virus that we could handle? And I'm not exactly sure how that, if that would be some new generational dynamic, and how that might even factor into politics.
Well, and it's downright childish, isn't it? And that's the thing. People complain about the globalists are taking our freedoms. Well, we've been using the freedoms completely irresponsibly. And if you abuse your freedoms, they are going to be taken away eventually. So if it's not by the globalists, it's going to be by Corona-chan.
We're saying just happened. You're saying like everything that everyone was warning you about 2 days ago in America just happened. National emergency. It's forbidden for us to gather, not just like Charlottesville or something like that, or some type of questionable gathering. Like anybody, total period. No one in America could create a gathering of more than 100 people for the foreseeable future.
They should pass that right now. There is you should not be going to the bar. You should not be going to movie theaters. Maybe you survive it. But what about the other people that you pass it on to?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is it ridiculous? Like next day, okay, Israel's closed down bars and restaurants. So now they just gas stations, banks, supermarkets, just essential economic functions. And you say, if the paranoia, God forbid, I showed the charts at the beginning. So you got to see if all of a sudden tens, hundreds of people in America are dying from this every day. They probably will. So right now the cases are increasing exponentially, and God forbid the deaths are somewhat increasing exponentially. That it was only a few weeks ago we had our first deaths, and now we're over 50. And so if it keeps on going up exponentially, like there could be thousands of deaths, and it's a question of do we just want to keep our freedoms, and if we die, we die. Or are we going to collectively say solve this? Okay, if we're maybe social distancing, probably of all people, Europeans in generally have the furthest social distance of people generally, not always, but as a general rule of thumb, Europeans generally keep further social distance than most other cultures. But still, that might not be enough to stop the spreading of this virus. And just the interesting dynamics of something like social distancing becoming a norm, that it might be easy in certain places to do social distancing, as in other places just basically going to be impossible. It's a lifestyle change that a person as a grown person can't all of a sudden have that dramatic a lifestyle of now having to keep a social distance from people.
Well, and listen, if I think Israel's going to do okay with this, and it's not some sort of Zog conspiracy. It's the fact that the Israelis will actually work together. And when the government says, don't gather in large places, they don't need to send armed troops to enforce this. People just do it because it makes sense. Same thing with Taiwan and China. For the vast, vast majority of the Taiwanese and the Chinese are doing what needs to be done to slow the virus down and make it manageable. Whereas here in North America, people are going to act like spoiled little children. And that's what's going to cause it to flare up. And that's what's going to result in you going to the hospital and there's just people lining the corridor sick because it all happened at once.
Did you hear about the situation with the delivery guy who was diagnosed with the virus somewhere in Europe and was told to self-quarantine, but instead went to work the next day and infected a bunch of people?
And we're going to see a lot of that in Europe and North America. And that's the thing. It's like, listen, I'm totally down for all the globalist conspiracies. Absolutely, hand me the Kool-Aid. But at the end of the day, the reason that these conspiracies are so effective at destroying our nations is because our nations are so full of shitty people. And this is a perfect example. Like myself, I have a really tough immune system. But I'm quarantining myself primarily because when things get bad, they might need me. And even if I don't catch Corona-chan, I could accidentally spread it. I could touch something and pick up the virus, and it doesn't affect me because I have an 18 constitution score, but then I touch something else and then grandma touches it. So I'm just staying quarantined, staying healthy, and if I'm needed down the road, then boom, I'm healthy, I can go help out. Most people aren't doing that, though. Most people, they need to see the new Marvel movie.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no cure for stupid, so you can kind of see why there needs to be more draconian measures taken on populations that are on average not as intelligent, because they lack the agency to understand why it's important to self-quarantine and ignore the advice there. So yeah, it's sort of a good example.
Exactly. If we lose freedom of this due to this, it's because of our own fault. It's because we've shown that we can't handle freedom, so we need it taken away from us.
Yeah, I'm pretty skeptical about these state of emergencies and taking freedoms away, and think that people should be aware of it and be thinking about that. But I had this article. I'd mentioned it. I think Luke Ford or other people of VDARE had shared it. It was interesting. Possibly the racial connection, and I had thought, because I heard about coronavirus because Jews started getting it first, especially Orthodox Jews in New York, that there might be something genetic. There might be some reason why Jews are more susceptible to coronavirus than other people, and maybe it's genetic or something like that. And just because why else would have some of the first cases in like the CPAC case and a lot of these other cases were Orthodox Jews, and if there's only Orthodox Jews are like 0.2% of the American population, but we made up like 30% of the first people that got coronavirus. So it was pretty huge anomaly. So VDR had this article where they claim that there's some source of like vitamin C and deficiency in certain type proteins that maintain better or worse vitamin C levels in the blood, and that these vitamin C levels in the blood would directly lead to being less likely to be infected by coronavirus. And it mentions that Chinese have the weakest of these different hemoglobins or various things. People want to see the article, and Jews. So approximately like 50% of Chinese people have this HP22 one that would be the weakest in defense against coronavirus. And I forget where it said Jews. I'll Control F it. And New Rochelle.
I've run into that as well. It's the something like the absorption rate of vitamin C. And vitamin C does seem like, if you start to get the symptoms, if you do a mega dose of vitamin C, it has seemed to help a lot of people. And I mean, it's vitamin C, okay? It's good for you anyway. But it doesn't seem to work as well for Jews.
Yeah, so I mean, it was something genetic. So at first, like, I'm not sure if you were following coronavirus for a while and you're wondering, like, that seems kind of odd, like that the first people in America that are getting it are like Orthodox Jews. And even at a point where the case was like 400 people, like at that point, like I think like 75 of them were like Jews, mostly Orthodox Jews. And the first cases, like, CPAC and, Ted Cruz, and it's like, oh man, that was an Orthodox Jew. And then even this guy in the picture with Trump from Brazil is a Jew. And, so I was thinking, like the typical thing, like, okay, lifestyle, Orthodox Jews might have a lifestyle where they share a bunch of germs, they are selected, they have a whole bunch of kids that they're helping each other raise, and you're always gathering around food and, praying next to each other for long periods, something like that. But it's saying like that may not be enough to explain the disproportionate amount of Jews that first got it in America. And it may not be enough to explain why Israel's taking such draconian measures to say like, no, actually Jews should know that, God forbid, we are more susceptible and more likely to, get coronavirus from other people.
Well, and on the other extreme, blacks, we should be seeing an absolute pandemic in Africa, and we're seeing almost nothing. And the suggestion is that blacks seem to be particularly genetically resistant to coronavirus.
And even that guy in the NBA is half white.
Which guy?
The gentleman, God forbid, in the NBA who has coronavirus is half white.
Well, it's not going to be 100%, but just given the lack of hygiene, clean running water in Africa, this should be running absolutely rampant, and it's not hitting Africa that badly. Whereas, Europe and like Italians especially are probably the hardest hit of all the European sub-races. And Europe and Israel are at great risk from this. Now, you won't see that. The media is not really talking about this because one of the sacred cows of our culture right now is the idea that race doesn't exist, even though it obviously does. So I don't know that you could say that's a conspiracy or just that everyone's afraid to touch the hot potato.
Well, I think Biden and Trump
has an IQ of 105, so.
Well, I'm saying almost everyone was saying that, saying like it was a political talking point, like, coronavirus does not discriminate based on race, creed, ethnicity, social class.
Of course it does.
Like,
anything biological is absolutely going to discriminate genetically. But no, you can't say that. You can't say that because like race is just a social construct, right? Well, and again, this is our love of lies is one of the reasons it's going to hit us hard. To deal with the situation, you need truth, right? Like if you're talking about the education system in America, you need truth. You need to acknowledge that IQ is largely genetic, if not 100%, 80% heritable. You need to acknowledge truth, that race exists. You need to acknowledge this, but we prefer the comforting lie, and so we're going to deal with the consequences. Again, vitamin C, super cheap, seems to be really effective, but it's not equally effective for all races. So they won't tell you about the vitamin C because we love lies.
If you think, okay, Ted Cruz met with this Orthodox Jew at CPAC, shook his hand. President Trump, definitely had his picture next to this, and ironically also a Jewish man from Brazil, although, doesn't remember because he has his picture next to so many people. Maybe he shook his hand, maybe he didn't. But in a few other cases, and you see that Ted Cruz looks like he's testing negative. President Trump tested negative. So, saying that maybe these Jews, somehow they spread it, at least amongst each other, they were more susceptible. And the same condition that maybe two Jews who were amongst each other or their virus would spread among them, that somehow, Ted Cruz or Trump had stronger immune systems, or maybe it's just specifically that's why Trump and Cruz rose to leadership, that it's not, their racial identity, but those gentlemen specifically have extremely strong immune systems.
I mean, like, what's Ted Cruz doing shaking hands at a time like this? Okay, you want the proof that our leaders have no idea what the heck they're doing?
Well, because it was a week ago. It's saying like, the man paid. It was interesting. I guess at CPAC, they have like tiered off areas where your passes, where you're allowed to go, is based on money, and you get like the gold pass, which was so many $1,000s. Where you could sit in the little booth next to the speaker's booth. So as the speakers, are about to get on stage and speak, you could just be there in that room, and you basically, because you paid for that, and there, God forbid, it appeared there'd been an Orthodox Jewish man who had, been doing that for years, a political donor, but he had coronavirus, and he was there. But that's how politics works these days. Like, it's pay to play at its best, and maybe it took something like coronavirus to take it down.
Well, and these things show up when the system is weak, right? When the system is strong, these things don't shake the system. But right now, the system is incredibly weak. The foundations have all been eroded, and this could be the thing that knocks the whole house of cards over.
It could also save us. We could have been on the brink of destruction just because of the momentum, that people wouldn't have slowed down, and God forbid, we would have just ended up killing each other and having to go to war because of the differences in how people want to run society would have became.
Oh no, not this speech again, Doovid. Not the God forbid we'll have to kill each other on the battlefield speech again.
No, well, I was saying the coronavirus
over race war any day.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. You're saying maybe you agree that like the tensions were just running so high that people, it seemed the battlefield seemed like inevitable, like any day, like people are just going to be on the battlefield because the tensions have became so high. And then here comes coronavirus, and like all of a sudden everything's shut down. There's no gathering anywhere of more than 100 people anywhere, like in any major country. Like whether we were on the brink of World War III or not before it happened, but like certainly like just all of a sudden the shutdown of like no gatherings of more than a few hundred people like anywhere in any major country.
Well, and that's the thing is are you familiar with Dmitry Orlov?
Sounds vaguely familiar. I'm not sure.
He writes about the five stages of societal collapse, and now they don't happen in any particular order. They kind of happen concurrently. It's not a light switch where it's on or off. But to sum things up, with the West, first there's the political collapse. Political collapse is where you no longer believe that politics are about politics, where you believe that everybody in politics is a parasite. And the fact that Donald Trump got elected is a sign that politics is broken in the West, right? We elected Donald Trump just to say F you to the entire political establishment because we hate both sides. Neither side represents us. So there's political collapse. Next you get the social collapse. That's where you don't believe in the goodwill of your neighbors. You're not part of a community. You don't know who your neighbors are. You don't trust your fellow citizens. And I think we're definitely, I don't trust anybody I see on the street. Number 3 is societal collapse, is where you no longer believe that the institutions are doing what they're supposed to do. And who out there believes that with rare exceptions, I don't buy that the institutions, medical field, for example, the doctor's going to give whatever the drug company rep tells him to give me. He's not going to do the research. So no faith in that. No faith in charities, whatever. The final 2 stages are commercial collapse, where you lose faith that the market can provide goods for you, and the economic collapse, where you lose faith in the currency. And it looks like we're going through both of those right now. If you see these morons buying up all the toilet paper and hand sanitizer, these people are signaling, I don't believe that the system can continue to deliver toilet paper. And as for the currency collapse, well, just wait for it.
Well, I mean, let's say, okay, like Tulsi Gabbard comes out now supporting emergency UBI, but let's say, that coronavirus increases and people die, but it's not, huge numbers, just in the thousands, maybe, God forbid, tens of thousands. And society stays shut down for a few months, God forbid, maybe 1 month, maybe a few months. But somehow the essentials are still maintained. We still, have our power and electricity in banks and gas stations and food in supermarkets. But we have no basic entertainment, no mass gatherings. But besides that, we kind of function on the down low. And the people who are doing hysteria over the toilet paper, 2 weeks from now, they're saying there's no public event. And wow, Captain Caveman, appreciate it. Definitely props, appreciate it.
That's one roll of toilet paper and $2021.
Yeah, we're saying that people like, okay, I went to the grocery store, I bought up a few things, I went a few times, and the bread, people were buying like illogical things relatively to probably what they should be buying if they're stacking up for long periods of time. But next week when they get a resupply of toilet paper and say like, no, we're still got toilet paper, everything's going to be okay, and maybe Tulsi Gabbard comes out with or some sort of like emergency payments to people so that they could afford to struggle through the next few months. Okay, you can't evict your tenants, the basic provisions that they're trying to pass in some sort of emergency welfare, food stamps. To me, I think that's the scenario we're looking at. Like, to see, okay, we're going to have like a complete collapse where we can't even deliver food anymore. You there, Jennifer?
Sorry, I had to get ice. Sorry, what's your concern?
Yeah, it's hilarious. There's a guy's flexing in the chat and then donated $100 to prove something, or £100 rather. So yeah, it's been interesting listening to you guys go back and forth.
That's a lot.
Yeah, 100 pounds.
That's like 2 rolls of toilet paper next week.
That's 100 pounds. But by the time Google and everything takes their cut in taxes, it might be like $60-$70 donation to Doooovid. Appreciate that, and a donation to Google, who stores all of my video. Now Google has hundreds of hours of Doooovid and Jennifer and other things that are being stored in Google's major data centers. So I think what happens if Google's data centers go down or something like that? But I was saying the scenarios to me seem relatively like they're going to plan to be able to operate the base economy. God forbid thousands or tens of thousands of people die, mostly elderly, and we kind of just lay low a few months. And then, slowly things start picking up and people could go at full speed again once the virus dies down. And that's what it appears to be what, Trump and the, global order and the UN, everyone is kind of saying we just got to lay low for the next few months. And, some people are going to die, but we'll be able to maintain the essential services. And, we'll create some sort of welfare state for people in the meantime to say, we're not going to let you die. We're not going to let you starve. And, God forbid it could get out of hand. You're saying people start dying and saying, yes, people are dying and starving. They can't do that. And that would be a disaster situation. And, who knows what would happen if that came. But right now, they seem to be saying even if we have to wait this out a few months, they got us, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. But, God forbid the food supply breaks down, the currency breaks down, you could have mass panic and you could really have a mass casualty event. One thing that people
Stop
will know.
Teasing me, man. It's not going to happen. I'm so ready for it to go all fallout, but it's not going to happen, man. We're going to be okay. I'm literally writing a business analysis right now for this thing I'm doing with some buddies, and it's, Corona Chan is a part of our business plan. We need to include it, but it's...
I agree with you, but I was saying you have to explain this. The only reason we are doing what we're doing is because they're predicting a mass casualty event. This is unprecedented to close everything down, and all of the experts in biological epidemiology are saying that if we don't do this, there's going to be a mass casualty event of New York Times said at least 1 million people globally.
And look at China. It's been rough there, but they're surviving.
Yes, I'm not sure if that's a hoax to me. They're telling me Doooovid, this coronavirus thing is extremely serious. Believe me, next thing you know, your neighbor, your one of your neighbors could be dead from it. And, and I'm saying I don't know, and is it going to be too late when I see it? God forbid, one of my neighbors is dying from it. God forbid, then it's too late or something like that. Therefore, we have to close down society now.
Right. It is a deadly serious thing, but it's not an asteroid hitting the Earth.
Which is apparently something that there's going to be an asteroid very close to the Earth, but apparently it's not going to hit. So yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say what's going to happen because things have already started to calm down in China. So it's clearly possible to contain it.
It's going to be a lot worse here than it is in China, simply because people won't do the basic due diligence to contain it. But it's probably going to be a major societal shakeup. I expect the world is going to be a very different place next year. Fingers crossed, there won't be any more TikTok videos coming out. It's going to be a major shakeup, but it's mostly going to be for the good.
Well, just from the precautions we've taken, it's it better be something big, for the to say why the hell are they closing everything down? It's got this is unprecedented. So, we're assuming that God forbid, if we don't stay alone and not go in social distance, like there's going to be a huge mass casualty event. And it's just crazy because all of the elites have basically come to this agreement, like, yes, like this is already a mass casualty event.
What agreement? I'm watching the elites. None of them can tell the difference between their ass and a hole in the ground. 1 minute Trump says it's just the flu. The next minute he's saying, oh shit, it's bad. Prime Minister People Kind is saying it's no problem. Then his wife gets it. They have no agreement. Okay, like the Five Eyes have no idea what they're doing. It's hilarious.
Because they don't seem to be using the scientific terminology, but it's saying that President Trump or any of these figures came out, it's like, look, we have a possible mass casualty event in our hands, and it's a virus, it's invisible, it's deadly, and if we don't do anything about it, there could be millions and millions of people dead within a year, God forbid. And therefore we are shutting down society, we are shutting down everything. And it's like, well, like, do you really believe that? Like, are you serious? Like, you're telling me that there's this mass casualty event that could kill millions of people, and we got to shut down society? And you're saying, you just wait. You wait. It's going to come to your town, and one of your neighbors soon is.
Dude, you put it like that, it sounds scary.
Well, of course, it's this unprecedented that they're shutting down society. Like,
yeah, but it's it's not unprecedented.
I mean, you're a middle-aged man. You're a middle-aged man. You're saying this has not happened before in your lifetime.
And not in my lifetime, but I'm a historian, so it's happened before. I don't live in the past 20 years. I live in the past 1,000 years. So this doesn't surprise me at all. I'm glad it's finally happened because something needed to happen. It's going to be for the good.
Has this happened before? And even in terms like...
it's happened way worse than this time. Go look up the Black Death. Way worse than this.
Did they had containment measures where they stopped all gatherings and they shut down everything, schools, and or saying just a bunch of people died? Like, I know, God forbid, people died.
Dude, yes, they quarantined off towns. People were so sick that they were going to sleep in a bed with their dead wife next to them. Thousands of years we've been doing quarantine, man.
Yeah, and quarantines are in the Bible. I mean, we have lepers and quarantines in the Bible already.
Corona-chan she's just a little tricksy compared to the plagues we've had in the past.
Well, so, I'm not talking about the virus itself. I'm talking about the societal response, preemptively.
And we've done it all before. We've banned mass gatherings. You name it. We've done all of this before, man. This is nothing new. Like, we're not even doing it properly. Like, if we had some good priests from the Spanish Inquisition right now, we could nip this thing in the bud, and in 2 months, there'd be no Corona-chan whatsoever. Unfortunately, we have modern incompetents that think they're smart because they're science, and so we're going to screw the whole thing up. It's going to be on and off for the next year, maybe 2 years. And, so... I wish we had some medieval plague doctors in charge. Those guys knew what they were doing.
We're saying the only thing to do, according to our understanding, is basically enforce solitude.
Yeah, exactly. It's like half the audience. I've been planning for this my whole life.
Yeah, like, I'm a streamer, it's saying like, oh man, like, okay, like, I could do this professionally. Like, I could, like, people are going to start turning into streaming. They see it's more difficult than they thought. Like, they're going to look for their teachers and their institutes on their streaming, and they're going to say, like, you guys suck. Like, these guys are so much better. And these seasoned streamers, coronavirus, God forbid, people are suffering, but could be a real gift to streaming.
It's like, haha, I've been voluntarily self-isolating for the past 5 years. Beat that.
Yeah, I'm saying it's like revenge of the incels almost, to say
I alienated my family on purpose.
Well, I mean, to say basically they're saying the way to beat coronavirus is to become an incel. And it's saying, like, okay, like, perfect. Like, I'm prepared.
Revenge of the nerds, much?
Yeah, or even internet, like eBay business. I became decades ago. Like, I have an eBay business. I do a little property management, but I'm basically off the grid. All of my participation in any societal gathering is voluntarily, and besides for my minimal duties in property management, I could do everything through the mail, and just shopping. I could go to places, like relatively, other people may not have that luxury, or they might have more immediate demands that require them to be in public. And if you're in the city, have a sustainable situation in the suburbs. If having a house, if you're in the city where you're in an apartment building and there's just extreme matters of space, like you see those videos of people in Italy singing, and like everybody's basically just trapped in their apartment building, or it's like those ships, that people were trapped and quarantined on those ships. And I was thinking it was interesting, Dave, as you remember at the very beginning when they have the quarantine off of Japan and the ship, and there's people infected in the ship, and Israel demands that they let the Israeli citizens off the ship. And I think America does also. Like in the beginning, Trump wasn't taking it so serious. And I guess people thought like it probably was ethnic or whatever, that God forbid, it's affecting people in China, but we're not worried about it crossing over. So much so that Israel went against health recommendations that were to keep them in quarantine in Asia, and demanded that they give them back, and then took them back to Israel. And actually that's why Israel was one of the first places to spread, because it was not a good idea to take him back in America. Also, that the first spreads in Washington were probably related to that ship that originally the U.S. and didn't want to have them quarantined there. You remember that?
I didn't know about Israel demanding the citizens back, but yeah, it just seems like saber rattling by foreign departments that don't take it seriously when they should have.
Well, now they're overreacting. You're saying Israel then wasn't taking it seriously, and they were like, we demand to have these people immediately, and we don't want them to be in quarantine. We'll quarantine them ourselves. And they say, well, how well did that original quarantine go? Well, not so well. And now, 2 months later, Israel has forbidden any gathering of more than 10 people.
Well, I don't think that's an overreaction. If anything, I think it's an underreaction. They should forbid gatherings of more than 3 people.
Yeah, but I was saying from the original, where they figured, like, whatever reason they figured that the Israeli citizens on the Japanese ship didn't need to go through the quarantine, that they would take them back to Israel and quarantine them there. To say that was a pretty fatal early blunder, and maybe you're saying didn't matter. It would have been the same situation right now, basically either way, even had they just left those Israelis in.
Well, no, obviously, if they realized that it was dangerous, they shouldn't have done that. That was stupid.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting, just like Trump in the beginning, and now he's shutting down state of emergency, when in the beginning, it wasn't a big deal, or it's just China. And so, I think it really is a consensus among elites that like this is some potential mass casualty event. And okay, I studied a little science, and there's been these science fiction novels and movies, and the pharmacy companies, and even in like basic biology class, that's why we have vaccines and flu shots and these type things. So people have been saying like, yes, there's potential that there could have been like, just like the earthquake, the one that's going to completely destroy LA finally, even though statistically, it may only come once in 1,000 years, but maybe this is the year that's going to be the big earthquake that destroys LA, or something like that. And you're saying that, so the people who were experts in epidemiology had been predicting this virus for a long time, and now the experts are saying it's finally here, and therefore we're taking bigger measures than have ever really been taken, at least in our lifetime, and possibly only a few times in the history of the world.
Well, the problem is, I mean, it's like the people that predict economic collapse. They've been the people predicting that the economic collapse. They have been right 12 out of the past 2 times, and so that's the thing. It is a black swan event, even though I mean, you can be really anal retentive and argue it, but yes, we knew something was coming, but we didn't know when or where or how. So it is effectively a black swan event.
Well, I'm saying that no, I mean, I think they're overreacting, but I mean, it could be my bias because I'm all the way here in Michigan, and we're being hit relatively one of the last places on Earth. And you're saying like you'll see soon, God forbid.
I think you will. It's coming.
So what do you think? They should have just shut everything down right away, Doovid, and just because I think that if they were really serious about it, as soon as it broke out, they would have shut down all international travel.
And that's exactly what they should have done. Maybe not.
No,
Again,
I couldn't have expected that of
and white thing.
mankind. You're saying that at this point, okay, they start shutting things down. The first few cases. So Michigan gets a few cases, and all of a sudden everything is shut down. University, done. Finals will be remotely. Just go home. Then these bans on all gatherings, and even my local synagogues and yoga classes, everything, done till further notice. And so right now we're just sitting back waiting, and if it, if the experts are right, it's going to be exponential, and within 2 weeks there's going to be thousands of cases across Michigan, and probably tens, maybe hundreds of people dying. And so if you're in Michigan, you're saying that's what the experts are saying, and you're saying like that's with us not doing anything. That's what you're saying was going to happen with us not doing it, with us, quarantining and basically shutting down all non-essential activities. And it's saying yes. And if you do shut down, if you just go about normal daily life, like God forbid, mass casualty event.
That's what's coming. And again, it's not a black or white thing, right? It's possible to shut down international travel for entertainment, for vacationing. There's ways they could have done it. They dropped the ball. They didn't do anything for 2 months. Most people did nothing for 2 months. It was absolutely obvious by the end of January that this was a thing. It was absolutely obvious that it's like, okay, Corona Chan's real, start preparing. And most people didn't do anything. So
I didn't drive around. Did you drive around like to your local main street and like there's still people on the streets?
It's Canada, man. We've got 4 inches of snow right now.
We got the casinos here.
By my place is a 1-lane road right now. So I can't draw any conclusions from that.
Yeah, the casinos here are still open. There was a little back and forth, and they might have like part of the casino open or trying to maintain this not having more than 250 people, while keeping the casino open, and everyone's looking like like trying to force the casino to close or something like that. But at the same time, it's like no one in Michigan has died yet. There's only a few confirmed cases, so like that level of like are we to come in and like forcibly shut things down, and what levels too precautious, and what do we do now? We just wait. Basically, we're just going to wait. And you're saying if nobody starts dying, if it's like a week goes by and like no one's died, do we start going back in our life, or are we helplessly stuck in like the whims of the elite who will tell us when we could?
Dude, stop worrying about these fucking elites so much, okay? The really smart elites are all autistic, and the non-autistic ones aren't that smart, okay? The elites, they're just slightly evil, and they rape children, okay? It's like they're not gods, all right? Like honestly, like Mark Zuckerberg, don't worry about that weenus, all right? He's not that bad.
What if none of the elites are autistic, though?
Oh, Zuckerberg is freaking autistic, and his wife is doubly autistic, and their son is autism squared.
I mean, what does it look like returning to normal? Is it just like, at some point a few weeks later, like either like no one starts dying? Like, okay, so I mean, all the experts, no one's predicting that, but we say like if a week goes by and like in America, like, no one's dying from coronavirus, we just return to normal. And like right now, like that's impossible. Like over the next week, like all the experts are saying like at least like, God forbid, like 50, 100 people in the U.S. are probably going to die from coronavirus. But if somehow like that doesn't happen, like only 2 or 3 people this next week die from coronavirus, do we return to normal with like a little bit of precaution, or what does that look like, the return to normal?
Presumably, if nobody dies from coronavirus, within 2 months, we're going to hear about some other person that sexually harassed somebody, but there's no evidence, so we need a massive court hearing, and and clown world keeps clowning along. I'll take coronavirus, thank you.
Well, it's okay. We had clown world in terms of like the politics and the news cycle and the cultural wars, but I'm talking about just the shutdown of all gathering. And it's saying like, how do we return to the whatever the the abnormal normalcy that we were functioning in? Like how do we return to at least the abnormal functioning that we had previous to coronavirus? Like what is that?
It might be impossible.
Gatherings are okay.
It might be impossible. Civic trust might be irreparably tarnished. It may be impossible to go back to the way things were, even at this point, because what options are there? It's either as serious as they think, in which case it's going to be a disaster, or it's not, in which case it means they were lying, which is also a disaster for their credibility. And then they're still holding the bag for this Saudi Arabia oil market disaster / the stock market crashing by what, $9,000, going from 29 to 21,000.
Well, I mean, let's say Tuesday, like it's Tuesday and Monday, no one died. Like Sunday and Monday, no one dies. And Tuesday, President Trump gets on and is like, I'm sorry, I overreacted. You could start getting back to some of your normal daily life activities. We had this precaution because we were scared it was going to turn into a mass casualty event. That doesn't appear to be the case. Please start returning to your daily life activities as before this scare. I mean, is that possible?
People are going to stop listening because the credibility is shot. The problem is that the credibility has been going down since 9/11 precipitously. And the people who were pro 9/11 truth haven't shut up in the meantime. They've only become more aggressive with their messaging, and they're doing narrative based now. So don't you agree, Doooovid, that the narrative is what is sort of the glue that keeps people buying into the system in the first place?
Like, listen, we're at the point now where people think the earth is flat. Large numbers of people seriously argue that the earth is flat. And that's the irony, is that even if Corona-chan turned out to be a nothing burger, wouldn't you want the president to err on the side of caution? And let's say he pulled the trigger and it turned out that it was a nothing burger, it was an overreaction. The sane response of a sane people would be, well, I'm glad he was looking out for us. I'm glad that they got it wrong, but better to be wrong in this direction than the other direction. No, that's not what's going to happen. They're going to Russia collusion. Did you know that Donald Trump owns some stocks in Saudi oil? It was a plan using his presidency to make a million. We're going to impeach him based upon this. Whatever. People are insane. They deserve Corona-chan.
If he'd actually taken decisive steps right at the beginning, and it turned out to be an estimation of the severity, he could just say, look, I did what I had to do. I'm not going to put profits before people's health. I would rather err on that side. But now he can't do that because he missed the opportunity to react decisively with quote unquote an overreaction, but would have actually stopped it in his tracks. And now he's sort of stuck admitting sometime later and having to basically backtrack on his earlier statements that seemed to downplay the severity. And now he's saying, oh, actually it is serious and we're going to get rid of payroll taxes for the rest of the year and do these other measures. So yeah, he's in a bit of a bad spot, Trump.
Yeah, saying what in all these things that have been canceled, like the NBA, it's like if a week goes by and no one dies, and it's like, okay, we overreacted. Like we could have the NBA and everyone could go to the stadium and they don't have to worry about dying. Or saying that like that's impossible. Like the season's done. There's no way. Like one thing you're saying it's impossible that just there's not going to be a ton of casualties this week. Like every scientific and any estimate of anybody who understands anything about it is saying there's probably going to be more people dying this week than last week. So it's ridiculous to even talk about what happens if no one dies this week and we return to normal. And you're talking about this return to normal, at most happening like a month from now. And we're talking about over the month slowly actually, becoming more and more distant from normal, at least in terms of gathering, where, these measures of limiting gatherings to basically nobody, to close to complete solitude, will eventually hit almost the whole planet.
Do you really think things can go back to normal after a situation like this, or do you think more likely there'll be a new normal?
What's unprecedented? You say, like, if there's like timeout, it's like God said, like, timeout, go to your room. Every single human on earth, go to your room for a month. And it's like, so coronavirus is kind of like God. And that's what I said, like, okay, the impending, like, Armageddon wars, where society is just falling apart so much that, God forbid, people are just going to start killing each other en masse. And, so God, rather than bring another flood or destroy the Tower of Babel, sent coronavirus. And it's literally going to be like a month or 2 month or 4 month timeout, where it's like collectively every single person of humanity has to be like sent to their room for a month.
Isn't that a good thing, though? Don't you think that people kind of need it? I mean, when I saw all these
well, I do. That's why it makes sense. But it seems mind-boggling, even that such a thing, like a few months ago, that even when we first started talking about coronavirus a few months ago, that we would imagine would come to this, that like everybody's just going to have to largely live in solitude for a few months.
Yeah, I mean, when you saw the people, like, what were they doing? The teachers were extending March break. Like you said, the NBA took the rest of the season off. I mean, doesn't it kind of give you the impression people are just dying for a vacation?
Well, I mean, when Israel first requested to get those people off the ship, I said that was already like a month into coronavirus in China, after a lot of people had been dying, and it first started spreading. Versus when it first started spreading in places like Italy, and they saw they were going to have to take pretty severe measures. It's pretty crazy. And I guess most of us, we live in places like about as far away from the epicenter, so we're seeing it last. But I'm saying, as we started hearing about it and started spreading, I don't think anyone imagined that like it would be collectively like everyone in the world would have to live in solitude for a few months in order to not have millions and millions of people die. And even if we all go in solitude for a few months, probably still huge amounts of people are going to die, God forbid.
I'm not surprised at all. Didn't I mention the coronavirus to you way before you actually thought it was serious? Remember, you brushed it off like 2 weeks before. I told you 2 weeks, like before you actually acknowledged it, and you sort of brushed it off.
Yeah, I told you at that point I hadn't really investigated. I just saw the news stories and hadn't thought about it too much, more so than previous pandemics or something. And I didn't really feel at risk. And but because it first hit Orthodox Jews in America, so I'd seen the story, but at that point, I think I started investigating it rather before your typical American. That was largely due to the fact that Orthodox Jews were from the first people being infected, and I follow Jewish blogs, and even on Week in Review, I mentioned like my synagogue, that one of the first people in America that got it happened to be the father of a rabbi here in my neighborhood, God forbid. But I guess I wasn't expecting that, when you were mentioning coronavirus a few months ago, that we would be living in largely solitude for a few month period. Although, I didn't reject that possibility, because like I knew the basic science of pandemics and, the likely measures of, solitude likely being one of the better methods of fighting these things.
I'm still waiting for somebody to explain the toilet paper thing to me.
Just the mass psychology.
Mass hysteria, basically.
What is with the toilet paper? Like
the manufacturing crisis.
Maybe I'm just not a filthy Billy, but I buy toilet paper once every 3 months. Like the last thing, like I'm thinking, a panic. There's going to be a hurricane. I better stock up on AA batteries and bottles of water. Toilet paper is the last thing on my list.
I can explain why it happened. About a week ago, some videos went viral of a bunch of people rushing an Australian store and everybody basically fighting over toilet paper, which in the mind of the NPC pleb, they think, oh my God, there's a toilet paper shortage. They go out, buy a whole bunch, create a toilet paper shortage. More videos come out. They go viral. Shortage happens. Basically some manufactured shortage.
Except it happens every time. Every time there's a hurricane, everyone's buying up the toilet paper for some bloody reason. And I just assume it has something to do with the standard American diet.
Well, I mean, like cold winter theory. It's long-term planning that your average person, isn't good at long-term planning. They haven't done it much. So when they're in an emergency situation where it's like you need to, do longer preparations than you usually do. Like if you usually just shop for your next week and you haven't thought about shopping for a month at a time or something like that, they just demonstrate poor long-term planning ability. So like on a simple intellectual or cognitive level, that's all it is, a demonstration of poor long-term planning, that people know they have to make a decision to prepare themselves for a longer period of time, but they don't know how to go about it. And like the people, the survivalists, maybe in these YouTube circles, there's a lot of people that they sell on their channel like survival package and various things like that. And so you're thinking like dry goods or food supplies, bottles of water or medicines, various things that maybe an intelligent person who strategically was trying to make good decisions about long-term planning versus the mass hysteria and panic of the people when they're put on the spot, like, oh my God, I immediately have to make a long-term decision.
This just came to me. Do you remember, like back when I was in school, they started introducing those non-classes classes for teaching life skills that were completely useless? In one of them, they had us form groups and come up with a list of 20 items that if we were stuck on a desert island, which 20 items would we bring to survive? And one of the groups actually listed toilet paper as one of their damn items. I'm like, you can use a banana leaf, buddy. This is a survival situation. You don't need toilet paper.
Yeah, I guess it also, maybe it's related to like cleanliness, like, oh, coronavirus, and like you're more likely to get it if you're dirty. And people, I mean, one thing, God forbid, there could be a connection because there has been studies that possibly coronavirus is spread through fecal matter. And
don't stop trying to justify it. These
God forbid,
filthy savages.
Let me add to it. And there has been lots of studies that show that your average person does have substantial amount of fecal matter on their hands, probably due to not wiping properly, and God forbid diseases spread. Largely, people get disease because people have fecal matters on their hand, and the disease spreads through it. So there could be a connection. Like, yeah, you got to be a little more clean. Don't have fecal matter on your hand. And, so maybe if they have more toilet paper, they're less likely to have fecal matter on their hand.
Bring back bidets. Sorry, I was saying we should bring back bidets. Someone in the chat is asking Davis whether MGTOWs will survive the COVID more than other people.
Well, your average MGTOW, like we're talking like the new MGTOWs, like the ones that, watch videos once a week to remind themselves how much they hate women. Yeah, sadly they might. Sadly, the NEETs will inherit the earth.
Yeah, I mean, or certainly computer savvy, like the people who are good with technology and will be able to adapt to the situation. And it's saying like, okay, like people may not realize now that you could, get free food delivery from Whole Foods. And like, I look Whole Foods, not like the greatest deal or whatever, but like, the computer savvy person that knows how to basically, I discussed this with Jennifer in the past on Week in Review many times in terms of like a karmatic understanding, or kind of like money is karma, where you could not be good with people, you could be good with the machine and have a functionable life. Like I sit at my computer, I make money, and then I go into society and I buy things. I make all my interactions basically involve a monetary transfer. And even though I'm not very good with people, I'm good with the machine, and I have no problems being successful in society. Besides for possible relationships, finding a woman or something might be very difficult, but at least my place in society of I know how to deal with the machine. I know how to get money out of the machine, and once I have that money, I know how to buy things with it.
Well, you can probably get like 10 wives after the COVID killathon.
Well, no, because you never be able to meet them. So it's that.
Well, that's one of the downsides of having to be in perpetual self-isolation. The upside is you can have 10 wives. Downside is you can never get with any of them.
Well, okay, like I could still find some way to profit from being good with the machine, order food, and like survive. Like I could survive this. I think so. Like I'm not worried. Like I could, like thank God someone just gave me £100 for the stream. Like thank you. Like I don't have to go anywhere. I could just order from food off Amazon and stuff. Like besides for my inability to reproduce, God forbid. And so yeah, is there there has to be at some point a readjustment. So it could be all of these disasters that famous streamers like Davis have been talking about for years. Is you're going to see like an extreme social readjustment. What happens when people live in seclusion for a month and then they have to become readjusted? And it's saying, okay, everybody's going to be an incel for like a period of time, or it's like, no, there's going to, there's going to still be people gathering or relations going on. And like right after this is over, all the incels are going to go back to being incels, and all the chads are going back to being chads, and it'd be like no difference.
People can adapt to a lot of things, but I do think that there have been a lot of cultural changes going on since 9/11, and I don't think they're going to be reversed anytime soon. How it all shakes out, I don't know, but I don't think the narrative will be the same post 9/11 as pre 9/11. Like I think when historians eventually look back at this period in time, they'll see 9/11 as really the point at which the narrative started to become undone.
Yeah, well, it's okay. Money, it's like economically, what type of money might change hands? What will the distribution of business ownership and these various things? Will it have some sort of readjustment, or is it likely that whenever this is over and we go back to normalcy, whatever that means, that the elites will still largely be the same. The owners of the assets in business are going to be the same people, not just in terms of like relations and who was successful or unsuccessful in the reproduction market or something like that. It's just going to go back to how it was before, and all these various things. Or is it possible there would be some sort of readjustment of like who was cool and who wasn't cool, and these type things after this period of mass isolation, societal mass isolation, or are you saying it's just likely to be the same people before as after?
It really depends if the elites have a unified front or not. Because if there's different groups of elites vying for power, it's possible that this type of disaster could facilitate some type of, intra-elite power switch that may not become obvious to the public for some time. It may have already happened, and these things we're seeing in the public are repercussions of it because we don't really understand the elite muscle flexes. So there's a lot of things.
Are you familiar with the Sabbatean Frankists versus the Reform?
I have been sent information about Sabbatean Frankism. I'm aware of it to a degree, but like with most of these so-called conspiracy theories, it's really hard to validate them, but I do like to keep my finger on the pulse. But yeah, I'd love to hear more.
I could find you publications from like prominent Jewish magazines describing all the details, but I don't feel like it.
I've streamed about that multiple times. It's not like my expertise subject, but like I even.
Well, I'm gonna use a metaphor for this because Awakened Online has a wonderful avatar. What the struggle is between the Brotherhood of Nod, who controls the universities and the media, versus the GDI, who controls foreign policy and the military. And they're the center of the GDI. It has a lot of control over the Russian government, which is why you hear about Russian collusion, while the Brotherhood of Nod has a great deal of control over the State Department, which is why you hear about the deep state. So these are the two groups vying for power. One wants to purify the world by making everybody equal. The other wants to purify the world by making everything evil, and then the savior will come and fix everything. These are the two forces struggling to control the world right now. Trump is completely allied with the Sabbatean Frankists. He is not our guy. He's on their side. They didn't like him at first. I think what he was doing is he rode the populist wave. Trump was just a millionaire. Now he's a made man. He's one of the Sabbatean Frankists. His daughter's married into it. His bloodline will go forward as one of the whatevers. And the other side, the globalist side, the Reform Judaism side, they're in retreat right now. And so we've had this struggle going on between the Sabbatean Frankists and the reform groups, and then Corona-chan hits out of nowhere. And one of the consequences of Corona-chan is going to screw over both groups, because the result is people are going to become a lot more nationalistic. They're going to want national supply chains. They're going to want stronger border controls. All of this is going to be coming out of that. And by the way, one of my closest buddies, he's ex-military as well. He's Jewish. He is the one that loves calling out the Sabbatean Frankists. He absolutely loathes them. He knows, listen, your average Jew did not benefit from George Soros selling their property to Nazis.
Well, which one?
Interesting theory, Davis. I just have one question. Where do the Bogdanov brothers fit in?
Oh, who are they again? I don't.
I'm just joking. It's a meme. Sorry. Go ahead, Doovid.
Yeah, I never heard of
This
them.
is absolutely what's going on.
I was going to ask you the more obvious. Where does Bernie Sanders fit in? Because I've been saying that the revival of leftist Judaism, Israel had almost put the final nail in the coffin of leftist American Judaism, through Trump and these various means, and even though there might be a mass of American Jews that are still leftists, that the Israel and the right have largely taken over the institutes, and then the rise of Bernie Sanders, kind of like the Goyim, the last breath of no, we like the assimilated Jew, give us back Bernie Sanders.
I think, but Bernie Sanders,
that's the American Jewish movement is kind of hinging on Bernie Sanders.
Except no, Bernie Sanders is an anomaly. All Bernie Sanders is
the most popular Jew in America. I mean, you have to any
right. But no. What Bernie Sanders is
popular Jew in America.
He's a man with a sexual humiliation fetish that enacts it using the political. That's why he always destroys himself. He's never going to. He just likes being made a fool of, right? And that's
God! I heard your analysis on that on your last stream. I laughed my ass off. I was like, "This is so dead on. This is hilarious."
And same thing.
How is he the most popular Jew in America? Maybe even
because Americans are cucks, and there's nothing that gets off. You take some 28-year-old guy with too much flab, a Ninja Turtles t-shirt, watching a black guy fuck his wife is the only way he can even get an erection. So of course he supports Bernie Sanders. They love the humiliation. They love losing. So he doesn't really fit in. He's an anomaly. Okay, Bernie Sanders is somebody actually accidentally showed up. See, you're supposed to have your sexual fetishes behind the scenes in Washington. Bernie Sanders brought his sexual fetish to the forefront, and he's just using Washington and CNN to get his rocks off.
Okay, I hear your theory, but I mean, it's a pretty simplistic explanation of.
I think, Doovid, you were asking which side he was on. You're asking which side out of this.
Right, so he's not on either side. He's actually, he really screws it. This is why everybody in the Democrat Party hates him, because he's not on board, right? He's not doing what he's supposed to. And this is why Trump was hated so much at first, because he was pretending to be a populist. And the Republican Party might say they support Middle America. The Republican Party hates Middle America, right? So there's some similarity there. Bernie Sanders is doing what the left says they're all about, the same way that Donald Trump was doing what the right says they're all about. but actually the left and the right are not about what they say they're all about.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Have you ever heard of this theory, Doooovid? Because it's the first time I've heard of it. I've never really looked into any theories about elite alliances.
I've heard variations of these theories. I'm not sure if I've exactly heard your breakdown of it, but I mean, usually these theories are based on your historical movements that take hundreds of years to build up, and there might be slight variations that include, I mean, it's kind of like defining racial boundaries or something. How you define the boundary is very, questionable. So if you're, what would contemporary be called conspiracy theory, but you're just looking at historical narrative, like group selection theory or group strategy, internal, I call them Judaism. I've been calling it kind of like Kevin McDonald terminology of group selection, and I'll call it the dominant strategy. I'm also a chess player. So, looking at, you have your Jews who, what I'll call your dominant strategy, and the dominant strategy is the leftist strategy of, basically everybody being equal, like you said. And then there's there's various traditional strategies, like the Noahide. We got Vince Bruno and the Stop Noahide, and he's talking about being scared that Jews are trying to outlaw homosexuality and idol worship, when the dominant strategy of Jews is clearly opposite that. But there definitely is variant strategies within Judaism of these different movements, and like race or something like that. It's very hard to draw the boundaries, and especially when you're talking about how these groups have worked together over hundreds of years. There's a lot of morphing, and some groups will work together and then against each other and switch back and forth. And a lot of times, there's bloodlines involved, and there's intermarriage, and then sometimes there's the same bloodline on opposite sides of these battles. So it could become intensely complicated, but almost all conspiracy theory is going to trace these things, and even if they don't agree with your estimation of who the powerful, who the sages are, who the forces are, they'll probably have similar spiritual powers that they're going to attribute to movements created by different people.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that it's like a certain type of governance that sort of doesn't work in a crisis situation, because there's nobody clearly in charge, and usually there would be, and you could just point the finger of blame at that person and take them out of power and replace them with somebody competent. If that were the case, there's nobody in charge, quote unquote. At least nobody is saying, hey, I'm the one in charge here. No one is actually stepping up to say that.
Yeah, so Zed Des showed up. Haven't seen her for a long time. I mentioned I was thinking of maybe reaching out to JF to maybe come on and talk about coronavirus. But thanks for showing up. We've been at this a while, so anything else you wanted to talk about? I guess trying to keep this stream more specific to coronavirus, so people in the future come to look at it. But did you want to take like kind of a karmatic angle and God forbid all the strife between man and fellow man, but really the strife is between man and the environment, and coronavirus is a sign of, despite all these internal human struggles, that it's unsustainable what we're doing to the environment, and the shutdown that we're doing right now is really necessary because of things like global warming, but all types of environmental stuff that hopefully this extended period of economic slowdown will help us get more on track to a sustainable future.
Yeah, usually karmatic retribution is hard to spot as it's evolving, but one thing I've been following is the increased incidence of volcanic activity, quite destructive volcanic activity. Could be coming about from the amount of drilling that is happening. Basically, people attack the environment for their own benefit, and then the environment kind of attacks them back. Also, there's been a fair amount of religious persecution going back thousands of years where people of my religious persuasion were banned from gathering together under threat of death. So this is sort of a retaliation for that. You know, you impose those types of rules on people, eventually it comes back on you in a different form. That's how karma works. It doesn't have the exact same lyrics, but it usually rhymes. And I'm sure we'll be able to catch more of these patterns as they evolve. But because we're in the thick of it right now, we'll just have to wait and see and hope that somebody, if only there was somebody who was willing to take charge and run everything and fix everything, if only there was somebody with that much skill.
No, sorry, not doing it. Although I will say, as a professional geographer, the tar sands are proof that Mother Earth has a rape fetish. I think the Earth likes it.
Well, I had this article from Tablet, and I was thinking, like, historically, kind of like karma, how you connect to it and what people think about it. And, mentioning, a few rabbis or people, like, typically people will blame these things on, like, God forbid, homosexuality. You say, like, okay, like, and usually it's like a natural law type argument that of all the type sins a person could do, homosexuality is a sin because it goes against natural law, and therefore there's verses in the Bible that directly say it, but like you'll be punished with mass calamity, mass casualty events because of this sexual immorality. So it's a typical biblical type understanding of karma. This was a recent article in Tablet, the Jewish periodical, that was talking about plague weddings or historically karma, where on Week in Review, me and Jennifer were talking about, Bernie Sanders in 2016 constantly said the statement, society will be judged by how it treats the weakest members amongst us. And it was saying karmatically that if you don't treat the weakest members amongst you and they start falling through the cracks, that can create an extreme karmatic void that could eventually take down all of society, that letting the weak among you just die off or suffer, that could be such bad karma that it will even quickly destroy your whole society. So these are kind of biblical values. So I was talking about these mass plague weddings that people used to have at graveyards, where people thought maybe it was like the scourge of the underclass, the people who were injured or bad things happened and never got married and fell through the cracks. So like the rabbi would get together with all these outcasts of society and form a mass wedding at the graveyard of the various societal outcasts. And I just get like forcefully kind of like pair off. So like all of the outcasts of society come to the graveyard, and then they get to the graveyard and they'd pair them off and have a mass wedding. And so I don't know if you're talking about Sabbatean practices, but it looks like that happened tens of times over the last few hundred years, even possibly happening in Canada about 100 years ago. And related to these karmatic superstitions of why is the plague happening to us? Why is this happening to us? Without some sort of evolutionary, like that's just how things work, or like the pangolin and Chinese Wuhan market. But you're looking kind of like, well, this is the punishment for our sins, and we should determine what sin caused this punishment, and if we could stop doing the sin that caused this punishment, that's what's going to make it stop.
The problem is that people try and look at the obvious sin, the notable sin, the easy to understand, like the normie sin.
Homosexuality, if you're in the West and like you're a Christian, that usually, or even like Orthodox rabbi, it's like homosexuality, like anything, if it's a hurricane, an earthquake, a virus, like war, it's like, it's always homosexuality.
Well, let me put it like this, like if you view, like the iceberg metaphor, where 90% is below the surface, homosexuality is going to be the bit above the surface that you can see, but the bit above the surface is not the iceberg. It's just the symptom of it. You need to understand the whole iceberg to understand what's going on. So if you, like, for instance, with our present day society in the West, the homosexuality is like the really obvious, the extremity of it, right? But the deeper aspect, why is it that so many straight people go to gay pride parades? Because the gay pride parade celebrates using people as objects to get your rocks off. It celebrates just using people as disposable objects, right? And that's kind of the deeper issue, being completely self-centered and not looking at your fellow citizen as a human being with goals and a purpose that should be treated as such, but just looking at them as something to get your rocks off with. So to put the label homosexuality on that and take the extreme example of the gay pride parade, you're kind of missing the deeper purpose, right? You're looking for a scapegoat rather than looking inside to see what we're all doing that led to this.
Well, if you try to connect the science, you're likely to, to your moralistic explanation, you're much more likely to come up with an environmental answer, or even like, the New York Times article I showed on Week in Review about the Revenge of the Pangolin. If they specifically, like, someone was saying this animal, whose only defense is to curl up into a ball, and that's been so mistreated that, somehow this virus shifted from the pangolin to humanity. It's the scourge on humanity. And it could specifically be the karma of one given animal that was mistreated by humanity, versus a sign warning of God from the dangers of man's destruction of the environment, versus someone who's in a biblical mindset who couldn't even think about this having anything to do with the environment or mistreating an animal, but it has to be to the common moral things that the Bible says you should upkeep. So, God forbid, the turn to homosexuality or whatever that is the explanation for any mass calamity. Hence Hinduism type religions are easier to explain these things, because you could come up with an explanation like yours, like tip of the iceberg, and homosexuality is just one of the signs of a society that has many, many other things wrong with it. But I think direct connection to the environment and how mankind is dealing with the environment are closer to the karmatic truth of what's happening here.
Let me give you an example from a previous plague. The Black Death in Europe was absolutely a judgment from God. Now, prior to the Black Death, now we need to go back a ways. So when Charlemagne rebooted Western civilization, there was complete chaos at the time, no law and order, banditry was rampant, and the Muslims were just, raping and pillaging all over the place. So he came up with a really, really strict social structure, a very, very strongly segregated caste system for Europe, which was necessary at the time. But 400 years later, it was no longer necessary, but those in power maintained it because it benefited them. And so you had peasants that were being forced to try and farm on land that we don't bother farming these days because it's just so infertile, right? With modern technology, we can't grow anything on it. And we had peasants, poor peasants, trying to farm this stuff. The church offices were for sale, right? Like the very, very few people were in the priesthood because they had a calling. Rather, it was a way to gain social power and make money. And nowhere in the system was just so calcified, and there was no love of your fellow man. No, like the nobles were not protecting the peasants as they're supposed to. The priests were not looking out for their welfare, physical or spiritual. And this created the context which was just rife for a plague to decimate the population. And so the Black Death comes in, it hits everybody equally, it exposes the hypocrisies of the church, and it exposes the ignobility of the nobility. It completely shakes everything up, and shortly after the Black Death, you get the Renaissance. And we're looking at a very, very similar situation today. The very selfish people, the politicians are not leading to look out for the nations. the moral guardians, whether it's moral guardians on the left or the right, they're very self-righteous people, but they're not very good people. They're not very loving. They're not very kind. They're not very charitable. This plague is going to shake all of that up. And you know what? If we're lucky, we might be looking at a renaissance in the next 50, 100 years.
Well, because we have free will, and that me and Jennifer talk about that often. Both have a background in mathematics, and we'll try to tie it in even to like differential equations and vector fields. But
Gödel's incompleteness theorem is why I got baptized.
Oh, well, definitely, like you and Jennifer could have a whole stream on that topic. But I was just saying that in relation to these periods of time, like people have decision-making ability. And as collective society, there's collective societal decision-making ability. And this is going to be a period in history that's unprecedented. And, this mass isolation across the world, it's pretty interesting. And to see, like, what type of decisions could humanity, how do we return to normalcy? Do we just pick up with the same conflicts and the same problems that we had before this? And how is it, the various decisions that people are making in their day-to-day life versus at the larger societal level that society's making decisions, and what type of possible scenarios do you see moving forward? Like I said, like a few days later, no one dies, and Trump gets on TV and says, "Okay, back to normal," or just some prolonged multiple month or various scenarios and the likeliness of the moving forward.
I think the ball's up in the air more now than it's ever been. Really, it's really hard to tell because ultimately it's going to partly depend on the whim of the masses. Like, at what point are they triggered to a state of mass hysteria that has a positive feedback loop, right? We've seen this toilet paper thing, but that could become quite more intensified, just that effect, right? Like if people started killing each other, right? If there was a situation of civil war or a lot of people died, to come back to normalcy, quote unquote, after that would be impossible because everybody would have the memory of having either been involved in or known someone who killed someone or something like that, right? I mean, that changes you, I imagine.
Yeah, the virus is like a godsend because the normal means, God forbid, of escalation would have been to escalated conflict, which eventually the escalation leads, to war, and war will cause a reset of society by causing, God forbid, a mass casualty event. So, like you were saying during the plague, where it's almost like a divine virus that is sent to reset humanity, and hopefully it doesn't have to be a scourge, on humanity that causes so much suffering, but it's almost an unseen hand entering and giving an opportunity for the restructuring of humanity that wouldn't have been there under normal circumstances.
I gotta reply to something here. Captain Caveman says no one's going to kill themselves over toilet paper. There have already been 2 shootings that I'm aware of over toilet paper.
Well, yeah, but that's where you see that if it wasn't for the isolation, that's the level. But it's saying like, no, you don't have to kill yourself over toilet paper. Like Amazon's going to deliver it to you. And so it's saying like all of this, you could see like if it wasn't for this, like I said, God basically, metaphorically, like a personal God got together and said, go to your room for a month. Because if we didn't do that, like, yes, the current state of humanity is, yes, we are killing each other over toilet paper. And if it wasn't for this mass scare, giving us a chance to reset, that is the current state of humanity. That is how we look at people on the street ready, God forbid, to pull a gun out and shoot over, who gets the last roll of toilet paper.
Oh, this is absolutely a chastisement. Which I guess, like, this is where I have trouble understanding the masses. The whole fear of death thing. I mean, as soon as you're born, you get a death certificate. It's something I made peace with a very long time ago. And I guess, I don't know, it became pretty obvious around 2016 that it was time to pick sides. And, like if you if you picked God, you've been practicing all
Well,
this
think
time.
the chapter went pretty quick here. Maybe you could respond to this too, but before it goes away, DeWitt Starless back to normal, explain brother Doooovid. So I'm saying back to normal, and the simple sense. I don't necessarily mean back to how it was a week ago. Like say President Trump, if no one dies this week and gets on TV and says, "Okay, like thank God, back to work," and is it just like a week to go? But the fact that this unprecedented reset, where something that's never happened in most people's lifetime, and questionable throughout history, where people are just slowing down and going into seclusion for a period of time, that what does it mean to return back to normal, and can that return back to normal not mean the return to how it was just before this crisis started, but return to some sort of true normalcy that maybe we've never seen before, that would be possible only through the slowdown.
I really just hope there's no more TikTok videos in the future.
That would be a sign that society is going in a better direction. If people voluntarily moved away from TikTok videos, we can continue to monitor that situation as it evolves.
Those things are just such pure cancer. They are just absolute cancer. Every single one I've seen. I just want to drink bleach or something.
I had said, Jennifer didn't like my terminology of like schools of Dharma. But I was saying like the archetype of Bernie Sanders versus the archetype of Trump, and it looks like the archetype of Bernie Sanders is winning out, like because even Trump is likely to say like, no, we're going to create the nanny state, and saying like, yes, you could live in isolation because the government is going to give you handouts, and even if you can't meet anybody, just stay in your apartment, and Amazon will give you your a ration delivery box, in regular, and the government will subsidize it, or something like that. But in terms of that, winning out of a national welfare state, however you want to describe it, that that battle could play out here over coronavirus, and it looks like Trump will actually take more of the Sanders side, where he's going to be like, nope, yeah, no problem, you're right, the government's here, and we're going to send everybody free food, and if you can't pay your rent, or if you're having problems because of this tragedy, the government will print more money, and make sure that you have the basic needs, and the free testing and free healthcare type demands that it seems Trump is caving into.
That's another angle to consider as well. Right now, we're dealing with some economic challenges that we have never encountered before. Technology, there's an argument out there. Singularity 2050 people put it out, that technology has a deflationary effect on currency. And we're seeing something very, very new, where when you buy a software product, you're not employing anybody, right? Like when, a bunch of people make a video game, you have a team of 20 people make a video game, and then 1 billion people buy that video game. Now, that 1 billion people buying the video game does not lead to more people programming video games. They just buy the $2 horse armor, right? So this is drastically altering how the economy works. There's arguments that it has a deflationary effect, and the language that we have for describing the economy at present, it's mired in a geopolitical context which no longer exists. So there needs to be a better conversation about what the heck we're doing economically, how the economy works. We need new ideas, and this could be the sort of thing that shakes things up so that we can actually have that conversation. As opposed to like the capitalism, socialism thing. It's like, yeah, okay, go back to 1950. We're not in 1950 anymore. Things are vastly, vastly different. And where's the line between monetary policy and usury? Like, these are questions we need to be discussing. but we don't have the vocabulary for them because we're mired in the 1950s, we're mired in the Cold War. So that could be one of the resets that comes out of this.
Yeah, and I guess like I'm looking at kind of like some sort of like Amazon takeover of the world, where and they do it by giving away free care packages to the rest of America. That slowly, like when this emerges, all of a sudden like Amazon controls everything, and there is no more like shopping or supermarkets. There's just Amazon, and in order to ease that transition, they're just going to give away a bunch of shit like that for a few years, so that until people recognize that that's the only venue to get anything anymore.
There were similar worries about currency. Like people will survive it, right? Like right now we're in this awkward transition phase where, like YouTube, for instance, like I've been kicked off. Pornhub has a YouTube account. I don't have a YouTube account. We're in this transition phase right now. If something like Amazon, if Amazon did take over, if all economic activity went through Amazon, worst case scenario is not going to happen. All right. If worst case scenario, if Google started deleting everybody they didn't like, they just deleted their profiles completely overnight, people just go burn down the Google offices, right? So it's going to be more of a mitigated. It's like a virus, right? The virus adapts over time so that it's not entirely evil. So Google and Amazon will get less evil as time goes on.
That's another interesting scenario. Say like if everybody is trapped in isolation for a month, and only way to contact is through streaming, that it'll be like a grammar lesson or like a political correctness lesson where people will keep on like losing their account and getting banned.
Who's that little girl with the bunny rabbit that died? What was her name again?
God forbid, I don't know.
Dude, that crazy Iranian girl that did all these music videos on YouTube, and then YouTube banned her, and her bunny rabbit died like the same day. So
yeah, I remember that news story about not that well.
Oh, that poor sweet girl. Yeah, I mean, like if they decide to be total Nazis, then everybody would emulate her overnight.
No, but I'm saying it's coronavirus because of the isolation of coronavirus. Like you're gonna go out in the middle of forced isolation and coronavirus, where the government might be enforcing movement restrictions and try to commit like a terrorist act against Google. And it's like, okay, that's like the double enforcement of the conspiracy theory that yes, you will have the government controlling like you are going to be in solitude. Like no, it's not going to be that easy to, like, God forbid, some crazy person to pack their gun and go up and shoot someplace, because there're going to be travel restrictions, and more likely that they're going to get caught and stopped.
Oh, man, here's the thing. Like, we've got so much incredible freedom, and like I don't mean political freedom. Okay, you've got whatever freedom you decide that you are going.
Not in the state of emergency. We're in state of emergency, man. It's like your freedoms are gone.
It's so simple to be educated. Do you have any idea how lax security measures are in all cases? I was just doing a little bit of I was taking the dog for a walk around the neighborhood, looking at the local businesses. And of all the local businesses, there's one I would have a little bit of difficulty breaking into, right? Buddy, like even in Britain where you need a license to have a steak knife, you can still cause some mischief if you want to cause some mischief, right? It's like what are you... Don't worry too much about some guy in a tie saying you're not allowed to do something.
Yeah, but it's like coronavirus.
God still lets you do it, man. We've got ultimate
coronavirus.
freedom.
You're going to risk like getting infected and dying, when you could just sit at home and get your care package from Amazon.
Well, and that's the thing. If you're making the choice, I'd rather have my Vidya than you're making that choice. Live with the choice.
Yeah, but it'd be interesting. But he's saying, okay, like you could see that the cracking down of censorship in social media, coupled with the state of emergency and coronavirus's fears, could be.
Honestly, have you seen what people are using freedom of speech for? Have you seen it? They're pushing the flat Earth conspiracy, At this point, I'm like, yeah, you people don't deserve freedom of speech.
Well, I'm saying, like, okay, after a month in isolation, you're going to come out polite. That's what you're saying. Like from being, streaming and having your channel, closed down and the forced censorship. That a month later, like, you're going to come out with, like, being polite and respectful.
Actually, no, what I'm saying, Faith just said the government needs to be replaced. I think the people need to be replaced. We've got serious garbage people on this planet. These people need to shape up. They need to get their act together and start being polite and kind to one another. And they need to start using freedom of speech responsibly. It's just the government, man. Have you met? I work for the government. Okay, do you have any idea how incompetent most government employees are? It's if the government says don't do something, just don't do that thing where they would notice it.
Jennifer? Is there
Yeah,
anyone in the
sorry,
chat?
I sort of lost the track of the.
We have any interesting personalities in the chat that had something to add into this? Because, like, I did some research and we went through, and we keep on rambling, but like I've definitely stretched my expertise or analysis of this coronavirus, and I usually try to keep my streams largely topical to the same topic. I don't know if anyone's in the chat who's been watching this that, maybe I'll just even consider just dropping the link, StreamYard's link, into the chat, because I guess I have to let the people in anyways. If anyone wants to join, or you, Davis or Jennifer, is there anything we didn't discuss that you wanted to discuss? Or, you got 27 people watching, that if you want to address the viewers directly.
Guys, I just want to get, when you are at peace with God, then there's nothing the world can do to you, right? Like, make your peace with God. Be loving. Be kind to people. Do reasonable precautions, preparations for disasters. Ideally, so that if the disaster hits, you're in a position to help other people. And when you're in that sort of a state, you're not going to be worried about things too much.
Yeah, I actually fully agree. Even if we may have different conception of God, but I was looking at the various religious leaders and how they're reacting. I mean, people who believe in karma, people believe reincarnation or some greater meaning to life, and could rather than just this struggle of paranoia because of things happening in the material world, even God forbid the ultimate price of death. But people have to have some sort of greater vision to even be able to think past death, and in some way, this coronavirus, God forbid, people are suffering, is probably going to be a good thing, that it's causing this reset. That any spiritually minded person, streamer, social critic, we've all been here online, giving our social criticisms and why we think society is moving in bad directions. And some of us might say, society's moving in such a bad direction that if they keep on doing it, really bad things are going to happen. So here, right in front of us is this mysterious virus, could be a mass casualty event causing unprecedented things to happen. So it's going to be, interesting. And I think people with a spiritual bent will, are likely to at least have a more level head and, make better decisions and recognize, how do you live? How it's hard to be a righteous person in an unrighteous world. And we're talking about the virus, and it's spreading largely due to uncleanliness. It's hard to be a clean person in a dirty world, and recognize that human psychology is basically universal. Like that person fighting over toilet paper could be me if I made slightly worse decisions. If I was thinking more short term than long term, I could be that person making those bad decisions. So some sort of universal human nature recognition, spiritual mindedness, hopefully get us through.
Thanks, Doooovid. That's very uplifting. And thanks to everyone in the chat for contributing. Has anyone joined the stream, Doovid?
I didn't check. I was think nope. So I mean,
guys, it's just a virus, right? And there's going to be a lot of positive things that come out of it. It's like it's not a good thing that it's happening, but we've been begging for something like this to happen for a very long time.
Well, as a social critic, you've been begging for something to give, and show society that whatever we're doing is not working.
Oh no! I mean, society's been begging for it, right? We've been teasing the dog, and now the chain broke and the dog is loose.
But everyone thought they were going to win. At the same time, most people thought, like, if only people did like I was saying, things would work out. And because there were so many competitive visions, no one wanted like to just stop. Be like, everybody just stop, stand still, think about it. Like everybody, basically wanted to win. And that's why we look like, God forbid, collective humanity was headed off a cliff to some sort of huge disaster. So we have this somewhat natural disaster that forces a standstill, and this time that humanity, where we're all kind of just like sitting here panicking that we don't die from this virus. What do we do with this time, and what does society look after this panic ends and we return to normalcy?
See, I was saying a couple months ago, like if Corona was hitting the way I think it was going to hit, on the one, either 1 out of 4 people I know dies, which I consider a win, or 1 out of 4 chance I die, which I also consider a win. So I don't see the downsides.
I'm not sure I understand this question, but it's to you, Davis. What would Spider Jerusalem think of CV-19? Feel free to ignore that if it's a troll question.
Well,
I don't actually know
exactly. It's about goddamn time. He'd say, I haven't been this happy since I saw a dead dog in the alleyway the other day. You guys got to read Transmetropolitan. It's fantastic. The protagonist is a tattooed, naked version of me.
Okay, well, okay. I'm not into that media. I'm not generally into fiction or entertainment in general. More straight books, facts, science. In what about evolutionary science? Is it possible that the whole coronavirus could be some sort of hit to evolutionary science, if like all these predictions, and let's say like it's not a mass casualty event, in a few weeks it blows over, and you're wondering like, why the hell did we shut society and take all these precautions? And it's just like, oh, better safe than sorry. But it's saying, like, no, like we think this evolutionary science that caused this panic may have been incorrect.
I don't see what it has to do with evolution.
Well, it's saying the whole understanding of virus, herd mentality, epidemics is based on evolution, how these viruses interact, the origins of them.
Is it? Like, I mean, we were studying viruses and outbreaks long before we even had Mendelian genetics, or Mendelian, whatever it's called. We certainly, evolution has contributed to our understanding of viruses, but I don't think it's necessary.
You don't think if we didn't believe in evolution, if the science wasn't based on evolution, we would be acting?
Well, we only developed evolutionary theory in what, like 1850, and we've understood how plagues worked for a very, very long time. I think that, didn't Louis Pasteur discover microorganisms prior to Darwin's theories becoming mainstream? I mean, like, they fit together. Like, they're both very probably true theories because they seem to be very predictive.
I have to research a history of science, but I'm saying, okay, like at some point, the first kind of like injecting people with the sickness for cowpox, wasn't understood well, like why it was happening, but someone figured out.
Okay, I hesitate to say this because I'm going to sound like a lunatic, but I'm not sure if I buy vaccination theory.
Well, they did.
If I went to Africa, I would still get vaccinated against all the nasty shit they have there. But generally speaking, looking at it doesn't seem to be vaccinations that stop diseases. Sorry, tangent. Let's just drop. I don't buy vaccination theory because I'm a lunatic.
Well, okay, so I'm saying I don't buy vaccination theory largely because it's based on the science of evolution. That's what I'm saying. And so I was saying there are explanations for what's going on.
It's not, though.
But vaccination theory...
Vaccination theory has nothing to do with evolution. It's based upon a theory of immune response, which is at least 50% true. We know that once you get chickenpox, you don't get chickenpox a second time. So there is some truth to immune response. But vaccination theory has next to nothing to do with evolution.
Well, that's why I need, I'd have to do some research, or maybe, someone like Jean-Francois would know, or someone that I could ask, and because I'm not an expert on evolution, but I know that these sciences, especially of epidemiology and vaccinations, are largely based on evolutionary medicine, and at least the medical understanding.
See, I view evolution as it's an information theoretic model, right? Which is why I think it's so self-evidently true. If it's capable, if cells contain information in them, which can be modified, and information can be selected for or against, then you will see a preference towards one set of information over another. And we're pretty sure that DNA is information that codes for evolution is almost definitely true, but you don't need evolution to have vaccines. You don't need evolution to have viruses.
Oh, so we have multiple differences of opinion here, and I have to do more research because I'm not an expert on vaccinations or epidemics or any of these things. But from my understanding, that yes, there is a direct connection to evolution and the way that we treat and are dealing with the crisis right now.
Evolution contributes to our understanding.
Well,
because if viruses evolve and change, then we can look at, take the HIV virus, right? There's a very, very similar virus in, I think, rhesus monkeys. And so now we speculate that this rhesus monkey virus evolved into the human immunodeficiency virus. And so that there's a connection there. And then if it evolved, then to try and cure HIV, it might be worth studying this monkey virus, even though it's a different, I don't know if you can use the term species with viruses, but it's a different species, but there's a evolutionary connection. So perhaps we can learn something about the human virus by studying the monkey virus. And so that's what evolutionary theory contributes, the idea that a virus can change over time. But even without evolutionary theory, a virus is a virus. And if booster shots work, then booster shots work because of the human immune system, the way the human immune system works. And all that exists completely in absentia of evolution. It's just that evolution gives us, it kind of expands things so we have more of a take on it. Unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying by evolution.
Well, going back, relating to the vaccines, I'm not sure if they're viruses, but measles or chickenpox or the typical vaccines that people get, are those for viruses? And what they do is they're injecting you with a mild form of the disease in order to boost the immune system. So if you eventually get the full form of the disease, it'll have became strong enough, and then how that relates to evolution. So I mean, you could be correct that even if you didn't believe in evolution, that medically you would say that that's the correct way to deal with it. The vaccination and self-injecting yourself, inflicting yourself with a mild form of the.
And just for the record, I do believe in evolution, and I do believe that your immune system learns. I don't think vaccines work. I don't think the vast majority of vaccines do what they say they do. I'm familiar with the theory behind it, but I don't buy it.
Well, then herd immunology in these things, that's also
herd immunity is a real thing, but vaccines don't do it. That's another reason I don't buy the vaccines. If you have a dog, you need to get a rabies shot every single year because the rabies shot wears off. And so vaccines wear off. We do not have herd immunity against any of these diseases we're vaccinated against. So sorry, I'm getting autistic.
So there were some articles, but why is it in China that they were largely able to contain it? Like, it came and it started, spreading across Italy and Europe, but it appears like in China that they contained it. And it's saying, is it over? Like, are there going to be more deaths in China, or that's it? Like, China, there was these deaths, and now no more Chinese people are going to die. Or, why isn't the rest of China having mass infestations all across China? Do you know, Jennifer? Or maybe it Davis comes back if he actually thought about this, or
it doesn't seem to line up with the evidence, to be honest. I can't fathom why it is. It suggests that the whole thing is a hoax, to be honest.
Well, they say like 100-some thousand Chinese people got infected in a certain area, and what they quarantined, and now it's over in China. They're saying they're ready. It's almost stopped spreading, and so why didn't it spread to the millions of people across China? How come it's spreading all over the rest of the world, but never, but China seemed to have successfully stopped it at certain areas, and it never spread it across the rest of China.
I would say because Chinese did what they were told and they quarantined.
I would say that's what they want us to think, because they'll be like, well, the Chinese model's so good, we got to impose it worldwide. Oh, we have worldwide communism now. Have to kill another 100 million people. Yeah, I don't really buy it. It doesn't seem to line up with the evidence. Plus, I don't think travel into China is really all that restricted right now.
Yeah, or if it's some immunology type thing where it spread and a certain amount of the people got it and a certain amount of those people died, and now the rest of the billion people in China, it's all good, back to normal. Or it's saying no, the people in China are going to be locked
distraction
down for another few months.
Crash of the market.
It's no, they didn't reopen up travel. China's basically been under lockdown for a few months and will continue to be under lockdown for a few months. And if China stopped lockdown, that all of a sudden hundreds of millions of Chinese people could be being infected.
It's possible, but it's always hard to know whether the information coming out of there is valid or not. I mean, you've even got these videos of people collapsing on the street. We can't even validate those, unfortunately. So this is sort of the downside to having so much disinformation circulating, is that people become very reticent to draw conclusions even on what appears to be obvious facts.
Oh, and let me be clear. I don't believe anything that I've heard from the Chinese government. What I do believe is when they stop shipping goods because factories are shut down, right? I don't listen to what people say. Look at what they do. And so I don't believe any of the numbers coming from China. I've mostly ignored the numbers. But what the Chinese have been doing suggests that, yeah, that there's something going on.
Donald Robertson thinks perhaps each isolated area that was infected achieved herd immunity. It takes longer than that to achieve herd immunity.
Yes, I think we've maybe extended it took a few hours, but we've expanded the knowledge of coronavirus of all three of us, although we have pointed out a lot of things looking forward, and it's going to be interesting the next few days, and God forbid, like I said, the experts are predicting that it's going to be bad. Like the next few weeks, you're just going to see exponentially more people being infected and more people dying, and those numbers are going to slowly cross, whether they get to the rest of China or China's good or not, and whether they get to the whole world. And here in Michigan, how long it takes, if it's a month like this of laying low, and a few weeks from now, God forbid, tens of people are dying every day. We hope that's not the case, although it would appear to be that that's the prediction, and these things. That's a prediction, even doing what we're doing, even with these slowdowns. So it'll be interesting, and definitely if these slowdowns last, we're likely to pop up a stream and talk about it. So we get week in review tomorrow. Davis, appreciate you coming to my channel. I see.
Oh, hey, thanks, Ben. I hope I wasn't too contentious.
Well, I worry about my YouTube standards and just the censors, and try to keep it a little more clean, just out of paranoia. I'm more paranoid of the YouTube censors than I am a coronavirus. But glad to see you have some pretty universal knowledge. Like I know you from streaming, more from, I guess, political circles, but I'm glad you were able to share some insight on this. Is any closing words or anything you want to say directly to the viewership or anyone in the future who looks at this video?
Don't worry. This too shall pass. You're going to be fine. Just do what you need to do every day. Take care of yourself and take care of the people around you.
Jennifer?
Thanks for having me on today. Nice to see you, Davis. Looking forward to the next stream. We'll see you tomorrow, Doooovid, at 8 p.m. on my channel, Church of Entropy. Please subscribe. That's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a week in review. And if you ever want to stop by there, Davis, we'd be more than happy to have you.
Yeah, if you want to start even earlier tomorrow, because all the things I usually do are canceled. So if you want to even go earlier in the afternoon, that's fine. I might end up, just because everything's canceled, I might stream some chess tomorrow during the day also. So appreciate coming in, appreciate tuning in. Captain Caveman, appreciate the support. I gotta say, nothing like viewership and research, but money is nice also. So definitely gotta appreciate the support. I'll keep the audience informed if Google actually pays me or not, and that's what keep my paranoia to make sure I stay monetized, to maintain the YouTube censors. So have a good night, everybody. Hopefully we provided some useful information like usual. Hopefully tomorrow or the next 2 or 3 days at the latest, I'll timestamp a table of contents, and so people could get directly to parts that are most interesting to them if they don't want to watch the whole thing. So have a great night, everybody, and take care, and look forward to Week in Review tomorrow night.